and welcome to the magical Tallinn. It's a magical snowy land here. And also welcome to everyone that's following the live stream of this final conference of the Innovation Networks for Active and Healthy Aging project. This two-year project looked at what mechanisms need to be put in place to advance digital innovation to benefit healthy and active living. And we're going to discuss this today through panel discussions, a few keynote presentations. But before we begin, I actually have a question for you. So please go to slido.com and use the code IN4AHA. And I'm wondering, until what age do you predict for yourself that you are going to live? And while you're perhaps reflecting a little bit on this and on the fact that medicine has done a lot to extend life expectancy, I have a few statistics to share. So we are in Estonia today, and in Estonia in 2021, life expectancy for men was 73 years, which is 5 years less than the European average. Women could expect to live till 81, which is 2 years less than the European average. But I guess at the end of the day, we want to know what's the quality of life that we can expect. And in Estonia, men can expect to live with disability for 18 years, which is 4 years more than in Europe. And women can expect to live with disability actually for 23 years, which is 3 years more than the European average. So let's look at the numbers: 85, 90, 100, 120, a lot of optimism and desires to have long lives. Time is our most precious resource. We can't impact the number of years that have already passed. We can't impact the speed of time, but what we can try to impact is the quality of time and life we have. And this is what we will explore today through 4 panel discussions and a few keynotes, as I already mentioned. We will look at how can we increase the investment in healthy aging, what does it take to bring innovation to the market, how to even create innovation, how to test it, what are the challenges for innovators, what should policymakers be aware of, which was researched in the last 2 years through the IN4AHA project. Before we begin, let's look at the welcome address by Dubravka Šuica, Vice President for Democracy and Demography at the European Commission.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation to join you today. I'm sorry I cannot be with you in person. In January 2020, Estonia was one of the first member states I visited as European Commission Vice President for Democracy and Demography. I saw firsthand the story of the world's most advanced digital society. The e-Estonia story is an inspiration to the world. In 1991, Estonia faced a big challenge and turned it into an opportunity. We are living in the time of a demographic megatrend of aging, a dominating trend across the whole of the European Union and many parts of the world. Demographic change is nothing new, but its importance and relevance both in the European Union and globally is increasing. Demographic change affects many aspects of our lives: our economy, our social and employment policies, and of course our public finances and territorial cohesion. The breadth and depth of demographic change brings both challenges and opportunities. We must answer the question how to seize the opportunity that is created by the challenge of aging. We can do this in a number of ways. For example, the European Commission ensures that demographic concerns are integrated into the development of our policies right across the board. We must ensure support to people throughout the entire life cycle and for all generations. We must face the fact that the European Union is aging. Everyone is impacted directly by the prospect of living a longer life, including the young. Over the last 20 years, the share of people aged 80 and over has gone from 3% to 6%. The median age has increased from 38 years to 44 in the same period. The Commission's Green Paper on Aging laid the foundations of our approach to more active and healthy lives. The European Union supports Member States' action, including through the new EU for Health programme. Think about the fight against cancer, dementia, mental health. Think about promoting healthy nutrition and diets and regular physical activity. We all know someone affected by cancer. Europe's Beating Cancer Plan addresses the whole disease pathway from prevention to survivorship. We need to take better care of our mental health. Even before COVID-19, mental health was an increasing concern. Having lived through the pandemic and now living through war on European soil, people are worried. As part of our response, President von der Leyen announced a new initiative on mental health in her State of the Union address, an initiative I have the privilege to lead. Our work does not stop there. To stimulate the supply and uptake of digital health for the aging population, the Commission is supporting the European Innovation Partnership on Active and Healthy Aging. From integrated care and independent living to age-friendly environments. This complements our Bauhaus idea with a focus on designing future cities in an age-friendly way. It also links to the European Care Strategy, which we delivered in September. The strategy aims to ensure quality, affordable and accessible care services across the European Union. We are determined to improve the situation for both care receivers and the people caring for them, whether professionally or informally. This was also in response to one of the key issues raised by citizens during the conference on the future of Europe, of which I was co-chair. Your work on scaling up innovation in active and healthy aging is key. Through this cross-border project with a budget of almost 2 million euros, implemented by a consortium of 9 partners across member states, you are bringing out the best of Europe. You have managed to bring together the support and demand sides, including the end users. You engaged with local and regional ecosystems. Truly, you are setting the framework for the future of active and healthy aging. I look forward to receiving the results of the work you have done over the last 2 years. I'm keen to see how it can help shape future European Union politics in this field. Thank you, and I wish you a successful conference.
The Info-RH project started in 2021 and is finishing in January 2023. And I would like to invite Piret Hirv, the project leader of the Info-RH project and the manager at Tehnopol Estonia Connected Health Cluster, to present the overview of the project. But Piret, first, you can decide not to answer this question, but I wonder, did you type in your prediction for how long do you want to live? I know you're not supposed to ask women anything related to age.
My age is not a secret, actually, and I can't double this for sure, being realistic, but close to that. I would like to live as much as I can, because in my age, life is only starting. And to refer, I can't see aging as an issue, or those who are lucky ones, we can enjoy the process of aging, actually. So let's do it with innovative solutions, and let's have fun on this road.
So take us through the project.
Yeah. Thank you, and welcome. Welcome to this beautiful venue. Welcome to Tallinn. Welcome to Estonia. And first, I would really love to tell you a few words about this building here, why we are here. Yesterday, some of you went to the e-Estonia showroom, and also what was mentioned before in this video greeting. So digitalization is one of the well-known brands or pillars how the rest of the world knows Estonia. But Arvo Pärt, I would say, is even stronger brand or stronger name if we talk about culture and how world sees us. So because Arvo Pärt he's a composer, he's 87 years old, and he's still actively working, and that's why it's also relevant to be here and to talk about aging and being active right here in this building. And even I found out that even some Estonians haven't been here, so it was only our pleasure to bring you here and to show what else we have to offer to the world. And Arvo Pärt is composing children's songs, classical music, but also Hollywood movie soundtracks are created by him. So he's really diverse and very well known across the world. But now coming to the project, I remember it was, I believe it was 3 years ago or something like this, when us together with our colleagues, we figured, we were thinking or philosophing or like really thinking, what are the obstacles on the way of innovation if we talk about, because we know that, as it was also mentioned, we all getting old. We know that there is a market, and we also know that, since I'm working for the cluster, that we do have innovative solutions. But somehow those solutions, they are having difficulties to go to the markets not only in Estonia, but also cross-border. So, and yeah, it took a while, and also I saw it from my work, what is happening, and then we identified few barriers, which is like, yeah, one is how to engage private sector and investors, and how to find money to develop your solutions. But money is not only the only kind of barrier to go to the market. Regulatory issues also big question to our companies. How do you know that the solution you're developing is actually doing something? How to measure the impact, and how to evaluate the benefit of your solution or service? So these were the questions, and based on these questions, we actually started to design what could be the answers for these questions. And we designed the whole project around one principle. Important is to engage end users, and it's really important to also to engage developers of the solutions. They are the core element. If these two actors meet, they identify the solution, they identify the problem, they identify how to solve the problem, the solution, then things start rolling. And after this, you have to bring also other stakeholders to the big picture, and to reach out and bring them to the picture. And yeah, the project brings together supply and demand actors to create sustainable model for innovation scale-up. So this was something that we had in mind, and let's see how well we succeeded, because today's discussion will explain and introduce some of the tools we have created. But I also have to admit that this is only the start of the work, because these tools do not do anything by themselves. We need to use them, we need to disseminate it, and we still need to continue working, which we are doing also in our cluster and also in other clusters and together with other partners. So the lead partner of this project is Tallinn Science Park Tehnopol and Connected Health Cluster, which is an ecosystem of stakeholders in Estonia. We have, in our ecosystem, we do have hospitals, we have startups, big IT companies, we have universities, and we also collaborate very tightly with the public sector. And basically the idea to have this ecosystem is to support these solutions to go to the market. And in our case is also we need to push them to the international markets because Estonia is a really beautiful place where to live, as you can see, but it's not a market for businesses. So all our solutions developed in Connected Health cluster and also outside the cluster, they are designed for international markets as well. And here are the partners of the consortium. So we try to bring together also in this designing the consortium, we try to bring together relevant representatives of stakeholders. We have Civita, we have a similar cluster like in Estonia, we have also cluster from Galicia, Euriga representing patients, XAMK providing living lab services, EIT Health, of course, really important ecosystem for supporting businesses, Proud Engineers, dealing with data management and consulting how to transfer knowledge, let's put it this way, to different silos, and also includes healthcare. Praxis, think tank here in Estonia, Slovenia innovation ecosystem over there, and the University of Porto from Portugal also dealing or working with stakeholders. So, and my job actually every day is to solve the question how to boost innovation. And this is the only reason I'm going to the office in the morning. And basically what we discovered is all you need is person-centered approach, test and validate your solution. Data governance really important in health and care. You need to have impact when you actually develop a solution or service, and be ready for the investments because you never know, they might be interested in you. So, and what we developed, these are different tools you're going to hear about throughout the day, but I would like to bring out also one very specific tool we developed during this project was scale-up model. And this was designed for the companies having in mind maybe smaller companies who are just starting their path on health and care in health and care sector, on developing or providing services. So we kind of tested this co-creation approach while designing this scale-up model as well. We really involved also companies in designing this tool, and have to tell you, it was not easy. It can take a bit longer, but if you want your target group to use the tool, there is no other way. So the scale-up model is ready, guiding companies from the idea to throughout what are the steps you need to go through, all this testing, validation, how to check compatibility with different laws and the regulations. So it's something you can check also on our website. But yeah, this was one of the tools, but for sure we looked into other aspects as well, like how to work with data, how to find investments, also kind of strategy for investors, how to find companies you can invest to. So, yeah, let's see. I really have high hopes because, as we saw, this 90 is a target or average target to reach, how long to live. So, hopefully, these tools will help all of us to continue living happily until the goal we set. Kind of, we need to have some positive note now. Because it kind of sounded like, so until we end. But yeah, so this was from my side a short presentation about the project, but as I said, the work is still just starting, so now we have to start using those tools. So thank you.
Thank you, Piret. I'm sure there's going to be many moments today to find positive results and positive thoughts. At the end of the day, our last panel is about the future, and future is always full of hopes. Before we get to there, I would like to invite Nele Labi to stage. Nele is the Vice-chancellor for Innovation at the Estonian Ministry of Social Affairs. So it's going to be very interesting to hear the perspective of the government and policymakers, and we will continue the discussion after the presentation. So the stage is yours.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to be a part of this project over the time, but I am very proud to be here in this final conference and being able to setting the mood for the day. I thank all the participants who made it here. I'm usually a very big fan of virtual participation, and hi to everyone listening to us and watching us overline. But you are missing out on something. We created an actual winter wonderland today. I hope later someone can show you what you're missing out. But today I was asked to speak about how to bring innovation to service provision in health and care. I have a habit of stopping myself and asking the why question. Why should we actually bring innovation to such delicate areas as health and care? Maybe we should look more into stable flows, like a usual access to basic medical services that we can really rely on, a pension system that is maybe not generous, but good enough and something we can predict and know for sure that will happen. Why bring innovation, especially in case we know that the innovation can be very disruptive and actually create chaos before making anything better? Answering to these why questions, I think we need to look at two things. One is national goals that we have set in any country, and the next is data. In Estonia, we have something called a Tree of Truth. Our Board of Statistics created this for us. And actually, there are branches for different fields, like there's one branch for education and one for transportation and so on. It's actually interactive, and you can find it in the web. But in the spirit of our conference today, I have highlighted two branches, one for healthcare and one for welfare. And there are some leaves. As you'll see, the tree in general is quite colorful, and there are some green summery leaves, which means that in these areas we are doing just fine. Then there are the yellow and red leaves, but there are some very special red leaves. For example, life expectancy. Actually, over the last 2 years, it has not grown as we hoped, but the other way around. Healthy life years, of course, COVID affected it, but even before, this goal has been very hard to reach, very, very slowly. Burden of care, the percentage of population in Estonia who have the burden of care more than 20 hours per week was actually also growing from 2.1 to 2.3%, not doing well there. Accessibility, also red. And we're doing a little bit better with some things that also may be important here, which are satisfaction of living and living environment and being at risk of poverty or social exclusion. So these are all goals that at some point of our lives we can very easily relate to. For example, the older I get, the more I hope that accessibility is improving, not the other way around. I would also like to live healthily, and looking at this picture makes me worried. So this is today, but what about the future? Can we pick up the pace? There are, of course, many unknowns about the future, but there are also trends that we all know very well. I think no one finds anything new here. Our population is just as well as in any European country, aging, decreasing, moving from rural areas to cities. We might be in the long trend still living longer, but not healthy. And this graph, I'm quite sure that in any of your countries, maybe the columns are a little bit different, but the picture will be pretty much the same. When I was preparing this presentation, I thought myself into this picture. In Estonia, by the current law, it's when I'm 65, I can go to retirement. Today, we have one working person supporting a little bit less than one person who is not working. By the time I will retire, 45% of Estonian population will be working and 55% need to be supported by them. Is this future fair? Is this fair to my child? So, probably not. There's the answer why we need innovation, because we cannot provide the stable services. It's not possible anymore. But what can we do? I'm here as a government representative. Innovation has been, for 20 years, something that in Estonia government has driven. Our e-state e-government is the first one in the world and still going strong. But we also can see today that this way does not take us any further from here. So changes need to be made, more cooperation and more involvement of the private sector. Today's currency, information, aka data, we sort of have a monopoly on that in Estonia by the government sector. And actually, to create more room for innovation, we need to start sharing the data. It is a tough question because we have our privacy, everyone's privacy, but we also want to have better services. So finding a balance there is work that the ministries are doing daily together with companies. We are also looking at the market access of new companies, trying to find out where are because we have a very small market, but still you need to enter here somehow and be able to grow. So what are the market burdens and places where we are not supporting the access? So collaboration in very new shoes, actually. Something called public-private partnership hasn't been very popular in Estonia, but only over the last few years these trends have been growing. We have even ministerial private-public cooperation projects going on, and I think this is the new way. The role of the government, I still see very strongly, is that we need to be able to provide a common platform for coming together, for discussing things, but also a common platform in the virtual world. Currently we are building new digital systems for healthcare and for welfare as well. So we are considering how to make these platforms usable for every company that enters, how to make it easily accessible, but safe, but still safe. Oh, sorry. And I will give just some examples. We have digitalized healthcare, medical sector for 25 years in Estonia. It's a lot and a lot of data. And just like 10 years ago, it was very usual to go to visit your doctor, and then for 10 minutes they were there just pushing through the data, trying to find anything about you that is important. So the last thing we finished here is to make things easier for doctors, who we still need in healthcare, to find things easily and very quickly. So I can highlight here. So if you actually have like 30, 40 pages of gray text, then instead for our, oh, it doesn't highlight. So it brings for the doctor very helpful to see all the allergies. Have there been any ambulance calls lately? What kind of medical images we are? What are the current diagnoses? And what medications are at use? So the older we get, the more data the doctors will have, the more easier we make it for them to look at, the better the healthcare will be. But there are also projects that are going on. We have already set up quite many cross-border services. We still travel, no matter how old we are, and actually the older we get, it's more likely to have a prescription that you would need to get in, I don't know, Croatia or Finland. So with many countries we already have this opportunity, also not only prescriptions but patient summaries as well. We are working on quite many life event-based services to make things easier for all of us. Life event like having a child, retiring. This is one event that actually causes many, many differences in our lives. But as a government, we can take this event and make everything automatical, actually. So with childbirth, we are quite far already. So we have the prediction of the midwife when the child will be born, and this will send like things from kindergarten lists from to any support systems that you will be part on, remembering you to book a doctor's time and everything else automatically, so that the new mother is not worried about what should I do next and where can I find it. And retirement is the next one. Personalized patient pathways, I think it concerns all of us that it's not automatical process for the doctor there. And personalized medicine, actually we were hoping that next year we will have the first genome-based service online in Estonia, but actually even for the government the laws are quite difficult to change. So I'm not quite sure this will happen, but this is in the process. So with this good note, I hope that this conference brings you new ideas, more new colleagues and possibilities to collaborate between different countries. But most of all, it is important to remember that innovation are not the ideas, but it's when we realize them, so empowerment to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Nele. It's the great thing about this event today, and what we've heard even so far, is that we have all the perspectives that explain the complexity of getting to changes. Is there anything that you are optimistic about in terms of the future, apart from what you mentioned?
Oh, actually, I am quite optimistic, and it's quite difficult to suggest only one. We have a whole panel going on for us for the future. Maybe I leave all those thoughts there. Okay, good. We will wait for that. So that's a note for the audience to stay with us, especially those that are following the event online. So our last panel is going to be about the future, but we have a long way to go until then. And our next thing on the menu today is our first panel discussion. And I would kindly invite the speakers for this panel to join us. So, Piret, we have Andreas Palm, who's the management consultant at Civita, a leading independent management consultancy in emerging Europe, and Annika Szabo Portela, managing director of EIT Health Scandinavia. Welcome on the stage. And of course, as I promised at the beginning of the conference, we really want to talk to you too, everyone that's in the audience here and everyone that's following us online. So here's the next question for you. We heard a little bit about this before, but what do you think is the biggest problem that European digital health companies face while trying to raise funds for active and healthy
aging. We will wait a little bit to see some of the results. And while you're considering what your thoughts around this topic are, I will give the word to Andreas to share a little bit more about the findings from the InfoHub project on this topic. So, what did you discover under the work package 6?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Andreas. I come from Civita, a consultancy. So I want to give you a brief overview of the two of the deliverables, which both relate to investment and financing. So on the one hand, we had the investment readiness assessment, which is a report, a top-down analysis of the investment landscape in the active and healthy aging segment. It's focused on Europe, but also touches quite a lot on America as sort of a reference case. And the notable elements there are well, firstly, of course, the sort of the overview of the investment landscape with some quantitative sort of estimates, then overview of funding sources and whether these funding sources have historically been used by AHA companies. Then we have some learnings from the previous projects, but perhaps most interestingly, we also have the identification of high-level investment gaps in the sector. So these are the sort of the structural elements that we see hamper money flowing into the AHA sector. And this brings me to the target groups of this deliverable. So it's sort of a market analysis. So all the ecosystem members would surely find value and find interest in this, but especially I would highlight the role of policymakers, because many of these investment gaps are sort of structural things for which policy is perhaps best placed to answer. So, for example, we are talking about coordination problems of different stakeholders not finding each other, and one thing we, for example, recommend is government perhaps could support creating sandboxes to capitalize on the monopoly of information that our Vice-chancellor was talking about, and so on. And then the second deliverable we have is called long-term investment plan. You can also think about it as the plan for companies to attract financing or investments. And this is, on the other hand, a bottom-up analysis, meaning that we really wanted to take this company-centric view. We wanted it to be, there's only so much you can do with written documents, right? But we wanted it to be as useful for companies as possible to actually help them anticipate the hurdles that are in the way, help them direct them towards the right resources, towards the right topics and the right questions to ask, and so on. And there we focused on the digital health market, obviously, with a special focus on the age-inclusive solutions, and we looked at the development curve, development cycle for both product and company, and also attracting financing. So the elements we think this brings to the table is it explains the market complexities. It's quite an unintuitive market to operate in. Then it offers up some interesting and useful potentially frameworks. Then we have analysis of different financing sources. We have done it based on sort of all the innovation cycle steps. So going from the early stage until scale up, and then companies can read it and can understand where they place in the innovation cycle, and then they can find useful information and materials and references for sort of the optimal financing channels for this particular step. And also we have sort of a rough estimation of financing needs for each step, so companies can roughly know what to anticipate in terms of cash outlay, essentially. And as said, the main target group of this long-term investment plan is companies, but also it's probably very valuable and interesting for investors, because it's also the case that we don't have a lot of digital health focused or AHA-focused or exclusively focused investors. We have a lot of generalist investors who might also not be very knowledgeable about the complexities of the market. So this also potentially helps for them to find out new stuff.
Thank you, Andreas. A lot of challenges, a lot of needs for collaboration. Let's see what the audience mentioned as the key problem of the European digital health companies. Okay, so we lack a market overview. There's uncertainty about regulations, sustainability, money, obviously, and this is what we are going to discuss now. So funding, if we focus on that. Would anyone like to add anything in terms of the structural problems in the field of active and healthy aging? We identified many problems. Do we have a recipe in terms of how to collaborate better and how to address all these issues?
You had like more than one question now, and really, how can we fix the world? But I would say that what we have to do is go step by step. We can't fix it at once, everything, all the issues we have. But in my work, at least, I can see that I can see different stages when companies are developing their solutions. First, they start with enthusiasm. Then this is the fools, friends, and family stage. Also applies in healthcare. And then there is a gap. And the gap is quite severe, and both financially and if we think also from the regulatory perspectives, you have to identify yourself whether you are a medical device, what are the needs or what you need to do to be able to apply for the certificate to be a medical device. And our experience shows that it's really difficult to find funds if you don't have clarified this yet. You haven't had at least started the process of applying this medical device certificate, and it's really difficult to overcome this gap. Later on, when you're already established on the market, you have clinical trials done, you have your certificate, then it's easier to be attractive for the investors. But this gap and this the process of applying for medical device or this certificate, it takes time as well. So you can't push it through with your own money. You're not still attractive for the investors, and somehow you have to kind of overcome this gap with some sort of money. There are, maybe you can talk about this more, how to overcome this gap, but this is something that we have identified in our work.
Mm-hmm. Did you also identify any of the approaches? So where do startups get the funding for clinical trials, for certification that's needed? Andreas, do you want to take this one?
Well, it really depends. It's perhaps one thing to firstly say is that when we talk about funding and financing, then the first idea or thought is that it's always good to get money, right? So all the companies, the sooner they get financing from investors, the better. But actually, it's really down to the sort of the investment or financing strategy of the company. We have examples, for example, one Estonian company that's going to speak later, who are self-financed and right now doing their last steps in getting their CE certification, and their strategy, for example, is to do these difficult steps with their own money, because then the cost of financing, the cost of equity financing, for example, is way lower. But in general, where do people or where do companies get this money? Well, they get it from public and private investors, probably. But one thing that's important for them to attract these investors, because the risk profile is very high at this point, and you might not you might have a prototype, but you might not end up having this regulatory clearances at all, which means that you might not end up being allowed to go to the market. So risk is very high, and one thing that helps is to have a very sort of thorough network of competencies in your team or in your network. So, for example, you might want to have experts knowledgeable about the digital health market in your boards and so on. So you would want to create this sort of certainty in this way for the investors that yes, we know it's very risky, but we have the right people to help us, and we know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I can add to this. And companies, they don't have to do this alone, actually, and that's why we have this kind of ecosystems like clusters. In our cluster, we can't fund the whole process, but what we can do is we can share the knowledge. We do have a pool of mentors who are willing to help or support companies to go through this process. And in some cases, we might also have some, in that sense, it's seed money because it's really small amounts of funds available for clinical trials or to do any other kind of validation for the product. So always important to have an ecosystem around you. You never will push it through when you're alone.
Great cue for Annika.
Yes, I think so. So thank you for that. And I pick up on several things. We talk about the ecosystem, filling the gaps. And I must also start with some sort of positive note. I'm a healthcare professional myself. I'm a speech-language pathologist. I've been working with home rehabilitation. And back in the days, this discussion didn't exist in the same way. So, I mean, the positive path we are on, also unfortunately due to COVID and so on, that sparked the digital health era to jump forward. I think there is a lot more support today, clearly, and that's needed. So EIT Health also as a network organization which also provides some funding, but it's really a question access to the knowledge, access to the stakeholders, then access to markets. I mean, it can be complicated on a national level, but on a European level definitely so, and then you go international, and then access to finance. So I think we need to hold hands with our startups, and that's what we try to do. So I mean, from very early stage to market introductions and so forth. And here in these kind of projects and as InfoRH also, I mean, it's really learning from each other's best practices, and it takes bits and pieces together. But I mean, holding hands and bringing then these people and different stakeholders together and educate them, because it's clearly that we are asking ourselves these questions. But now, I mean, you spend 2 years to think about it. Investors, they don't, and they see the risk, and then we talk about healthcare, and it's super long, and they obviously return on investment may not be as attractive. So I think we need to sell it, but on a broader level, and that's why also policy making is important. I mean, we are on a good path, I must say. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question for you. So EIT in general is one of the main actors in driving innovation in Europe. A large funding was just announced yesterday, I think 150 million dedicated to healthcare. But, you know, healthcare is a broad term, and healthy aging is just one aspect of it. Can you talk a little bit about how much focus does EIT Health put on healthy aging? How do you support innovation for this specific segment?
Well, I mean, also the demographics situation was also behind when EIT Health was started. So we have a clear focus on healthy and active aging. Now, today, I mean, it's broader than the aging population. So we support innovation for all ages, and usually when it comes to also funding, I mean, it can be disease specific. So I would say a lot of focus on prevention, and so it's not exclusive. So it's broad, but I mean this was the source of why we are around as well, and also about. The EIT funding, so I think the number that you mentioned is also for the other kind of areas, like KICS, and clearly is that we today see ourselves not just as a funding agency. It's important with this network and back to again knowledge. So it's to connect the different parts that needs to come together and work, and and it concerns all of us, obviously.
Piret and Andreas, as mentioned by Annika, when we talk about active and healthy aging or active and healthy living, this can very quickly also become a broad topic. So perhaps in the project, did you limit yourself in any way in terms of how did you define what goes under active and healthy aging, or what kind of companies are trying to tap into the field? Earlier, Piret, you mentioned that it's often difficult for startups to then come into the space and realize that healthcare or digital health is very regulated. So to which extent do you see that innovators that already know the space actually try to create solutions, or to which extent are innovators from other industries or other tech areas coming into the space and trying to tackle the problems with solutions that perhaps don't seem to be intended for active and healthy aging primarily?
So maybe I will start. It's really important signal for the companies how government is taking these issues. If there is a political will and decision that these are important areas of activities for us, and also not only the talks, but also you can see that government is kind of directing funds or doing, I don't know, awareness raising among people. If we talk about, for instance, about mental health or chronic diseases or something like this, if companies do see that government has interest in those areas, there are programs, there are strategies supporting these areas, maybe strategies even with a bit money wouldn't hurt also. So then the companies also get this signal that, okay, this is the path we want to take as well, because we can see that this is important, because companies, I'm claiming that companies who are working on health and care sector, they do it because they have this mission to change something in people's lives. But you can't kick far with only with a mission. You need to have some sort of financial or the kind of support also coming from outside, and financial goals to build your businesses. So my first argument is that if government is preparing this market for the companies, then they are willing and ready to access the market. And yeah, I do see that companies from other areas of life or like other industries are coming to health tech as well. Telecommunication, for instance, there is a direct link, for instance. And also I can see in the robotics, a lot of things are coming also from there. And we are collaborating with the universities. So, there the really important thing is how to make this science, how to take this real life product out of from this science project or this science discovery. This is also a different path, actually, how to monetize your scientific discoveries. Also really important. We have to work with this as well, but I can see the movement from outside to health tech, because the market is highly regulated. It might be a bit difficult to understand, but it's really stable. You can see the trends, as we talk about years about aging. It's still happening. Nothing new is coming. So once you really establish the collaboration between public sector and private sector, then the market is quite stable and gives you opportunity to develop it even further. So yeah. I would say that the interest is high, and we do have technologies coming from outside the health tech as well.
We have another question for the audience at this point. So, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you assess the importance of public funding for innovation in the space? As we talked about earlier, investors want to see results, they want to see clinical trials, they want to see certifications, and these things cost. So, to which extent do we need to rely on public funding? What does the audience think? Let's wait a few seconds. And then, Andreas, I will ask you for the first comment, just so you know, you can get already ready. Okay, so 4, 5. 5 is winning at the moment.
So 5 is very important.
Yes, exactly. Andreas, what were the findings from the project?
Yeah, well, public funding is definitely very important in this market, but I would claim that the public funding or public investment it's not enough, or it's not a good idea for the investment to primarily go to giving money to early stage companies. I think the role of the public investment, and obviously public sector, if we have public healthcare, public sector is incentivized to invest in this segment, because the costs of healthcare will increase massively due to the trends, right? I think the public investment should also go to services, public services that would help the companies overcome these hurdles. For example, mentioned the possibility to set up sort of public-backed sandboxes, so that the public sector could sort of help overcome the coordination problems, to help bring different stakeholders together. But also, public investment, I think, should go to alleviate these market barriers a bit. You know, for example, investment should go to perhaps reworking the reimbursement systems, so that digital health companies would not be disadvantaged. You know, maybe they need new methodologies for assessing who to reimburse and not, right? So I think it's public money and contribution is very important, but I think we have to see it from a broader view than just, you know, giving public money to companies. And the idea is that if the public money could alleviate some of these hurdles, also give money to companies to overcome this valley of death, right? Then the interest from the private sector to fund the market, that we all know has like amazing macro trends in favor of it, is will increase, and then the market becomes competitive, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the view from our research.
One thing that we haven't discussed yet is the fact that this project was a European project. 47 partners or stakeholders were involved. What kind of differences did you observe between the markets? Because policies and care for the aging population differs a lot across Europe, which is a challenge when startups want to scale. Any recommendations for scale-up roadmap policy makers could benefit from Piret?
Yeah. The short answer is that markets are different. So, and what becomes to health and care, markets are different. So there is no one big European market for the companies. So, but the suggestion is that these living labs are really, we are going to talk about this also later during this day, but you really need to have partners in each market where you want to enter. And one of the good doors to open is to go through living labs. So find a partner in respective market, do your testing validation in this living lab, and then already you will have better understanding about the laws, legislations, reimbursement, and also we had pretty interesting results when we were testing. We also had some test companies to enter different living lab services see what are the outcomes. And it was really, really promising that Living Labs really do help you open the markets in respective countries. And they will even help you to design your service according maybe to the cultural differences of the country, or as we have the age group here, a bit different than maybe 20 years old patients. So you have to find partners in every single country. Of course, we also recommended that we kind of should unify the regulations, but I'm quite realistic about this. So yeah, we should, but this is something that we can't fix in the nearest future. So for the practical advice for the companies is find a partner, find a testing facility, and go through this opportunity.
And just one brief note that I think Living Lab is exactly a very good example of a service that public investment could support, right? It's not, it's something very useful for the companies.
Yeah.
Let's not steal the thunder to the speakers that are coming up next on the panel discussion exactly about person-centeredness and Living Labs. If we try to be a bit more concrete, Annika, what kind of practical examples do you see through EIT Health? What kind of projects are specifically focused on active and healthy aging living? But examples first.
Yeah, no, so we obviously in the way we work, we want the companies also to get the support, so they don't get to invent the wheel. So introduction to different markets and so forth. But what you are asking here is also concrete examples, and one such also talking about knowledge. I mean, we have a PhD school working or focusing on aging and the innovation process. So that's also a way to spread knowledge across borders. And then we have supported plentiful of also digital health companies. And one that I particularly have in mind is a company, a Danish one called ThinkSense, which was, have been used for example, in nursing homes. So it's a VR tool that do not go into diagnostics or so forth, but it's really a tool that activates and stimulates social activities and so on. But that is also an example of how it can be difficult with investments, because clearly it's also increasing like well-being and so forth. But I mean, how do you, market-wise it can be tricky. And we have then many of these solutions also that are diagnosed specific, so Parkinson's disease and so forth. But I mean, the joy, I would say, in our work is to follow these examples now, and really, depending on where they are, we hold hands. So we support in programs, and then later on they come back, and we, continue. So it's like a journey.
Mm-hmm. I would encourage the audience to type any questions that you might have for our panelists in Slido, in case you haven't done so yet. We will move to the questions from the audience in 2 minutes. Before we get there, perhaps a question for Andreas and Piret. Obviously, we want the audience to have as many useful takeaways from these debates as possible. So what would you say are the maybe 1, 2, or 3 key points that you found out and are very useful for startups to know if they want to be eligible for private and or public funding? If you would have to pinpoint to 1 or 2 points of advice, what would it be?
I can start first. You need to have a real life problem you're solving with a solution. If you don't have this, then forget it. It doesn't work like this that I have a nail, please give me a hammer or something like this. Yeah, you have to identify the real life issue. And once you have done this, then the other thing is that you're not doing this alone. Find a supporting system around you. And third thing I would maybe point out is, if you have planned that your solution, development of your solution will take like 6 months or 1 year, then double it, the time span. And you will still kind of see that you're running out of time.
Andreas?
I would, for the sort of very early stage of the companies, I would reflect on what Piret said, that find competence, like external competence, find people who know about the market, about the healthcare system and so on, because it's very difficult to do it alone, probably impossible. And then for a bit later stage, when we talk about readiness for investment, then sort of work out your monetization plan. Be very clear. Well, you have a product. Be very clear who you're selling it to. You know, who's the user, who's the payer, because these things can get mixed up. These different stakeholders, and you know, it can be unintuitive where the money is actually coming from, who is actually using it, who is it for, and so on.
And Annika?
Yeah, well, I would take the next step, because obviously you can have your plan, but then it's can completely change depending if you go to another market. So you kind of need to start again. So be thorough, very much think it through, and maybe the business plan or other things, you know, change a little bit, and then ask for your support system. So it's linking back to what you already said.
We got a few questions from the audience. Those that are here with us live, you can also ask the questions. Just raise your hand and you will get the microphone. But the question that we got through Slido are, the first one, how do you ensure procurement compliance when scaling and spreading of companies' innovative solutions? Procurement compliance when scaling. Any thoughts?
I think that this goes along with really, as we talked already, you have to find the right people who will support you with the knowledge. This is something that you need to have, the supporting ecosystem, and start thinking about the data, start thinking about the processes you need to have before applying or before being part of this procurement process, or already in the beginning, once you start developing your solution. And then, especially when we talk about procurement of innovative solutions, it's really difficult, because then the time is your enemy there. Normally procurement processes, they take, I don't know how long time, then innovative solution is not innovative anymore in the end of this process, for sure. So again, I would say that this networking, having the right knowledge, and finding people who can teach you how to go through this process, be open and ask questions. This is something that we can provide from our side. I don't know if you have better tools.
Provide the knowledge again, and it's a good question, but it's not easy to answer, because it's definitely depending on where you are. It can be regionally, nationally, depending on market, but very much the same thing. And there is obviously knowledge, but it's sometimes difficult to know where to find it. So then back to those around you that support you, that would be able to guide.
Just to add, really like to emphasize that companies should not underestimate the need to have contacts in the market. Like, it's not a transparent industry in that sense. You won't Google your way into market. You have to know the right people.
Okay, that's a thought to remember. When we discussed, it may have seemed that we were very focused on startups. And one interesting question that we got from the audience is that we tend to think only about startups, while small and medium enterprises are the core of the industrial ecosystem in Europe. How can we better ensure their sustainability?
Well, in our cluster, we are working with scale-ups as well. It's even, I would say that startups are even too early for our ecosystem. So we have different tools for them, but we are working with scale-ups. And It's a bit tricky with scale-ups if we think about how they built their solution from the beginning. And then now we have new regulations coming, and they might not have the data you need, for instance, to apply for certain features they need to have in their solutions. So it is a bit difficult, but I would say that we are working with scale-ups mostly, in that sense, yeah. And it's really difficult to enter as a really novel or fresh startup into this healthcare market. It is a business more of established companies, a bit more established companies, let's put it this way.
Do we have any? Okay, we have some comments, questions at the audience. So go ahead.
Yeah, and I have the mic, so if you don't mind, I start. Great discussion, I really like it. I have two comments and a question. Comment would be on the public funding. I would actually add to that, public funding is really for creating the infrastructure, for creating the possibility. So it's not really going to the companies or whatever company, but it's just allowing that the health system is prepared. So I think that's where we need public funding, and Estonia is doing a great job here. Actually, Spain also, there's a lot of building up, no, what they call the digital index is quite high in those countries, and that's much easier then for the smaller companies being SMEs. I love that question on SMEs versus startups. I think SMEs are very, very important too. So that was my first point. The second, maybe adding on what Annika said, this question on how they can raise funds. I think for me the most important that they show that they bring value. That's the most important. And then communities like the AHA community, or it was the EP, now the Info AHA community, and also the EIT Health community is there to show that it makes sense, no? With the different projects we do, but also with the community that we have. That they say, well, I'm not an alone SME like fighting and have my little thing that I can know. I have a community. There are hospitals actually using already my device. And I think here, that then would be my question, to see on how do you envision that Info AHA and also EIT Health can collaborate in the future. I know we have a lot of overlap in terms of members or in terms of I would say active actors that are moving in the health sector. How can we join forces in the future? We know in EIT Health, probably you are aware, we have the investors, how you call it, Annika, function or investors group, no? So we actually bring together investors across the European, across Europe, so that they can exchange experience. So we definitely can help to bring closer the community or the SMEs to the investor network. So I would see how you envision this, how we can collaborate further in the future. Thanks.
Yeah, I can take it from this. Thank you for the question, and thank you for these comments, because I strongly believe that it's really important to have identified the role of the public money to create the environment, to create the infrastructure, and then private companies are ready to provide services built on this infrastructure. And how we can build this community stronger, companies are really practical. They need to see the benefit of the networks, and then they will also join. And this is point number one. And my argument number two is that spreading information, there is never enough information. And with that, I mean that we do not need to overload, but we need to focus on our target groups. We need to use channels that our ecosystem is using, and we need to deliver the messages that actually are relevant to them. So then the network actually grows, and creates also value. So this is something that I also saw during this project, that this is really relevant.
We had one more question or comment from the audience before we wrap up.
Yeah, and if I may,
Sure.
for follow-up, and thank you, Magda, also for pointing out to the important things. I mean, communities, and within EIT Health as well. I mean, we have the university, the academic partners, the healthcare providers, the industry, the startups, the SMEs, and this is a question that concerns all. And I think that also we, moving toward the future, would like to develop what we offer today into into something that you could describe as a venture builder, but really supporting academia and hospitals and those that have great ideas to help them there in the very beginning, and then have a system where you go all the way. And this is an engaging topic, so I would also invite you to come and speak to us during lunch breaks and so on, and we can talk more about it.
And also the outcomes of the project, actually, as I said, these are only, like, they will start their work right now, these outcomes. I mean, all the reports, they should be used to build the knowledge, to build the community, and to have this better ecosystem and more functional support system for the companies.
Next question, and
Yes.
just perhaps one more thing to add to the audience. All the reports that were just mentioned are already available on the website, so I would encourage everyone to just visit the official website to check them and see if there's anything that's specifically useful for your case.
Thank you. Farah Pons from Yeti Health as well. I have a bit of a philosophical question. I assume when you have sedentary and passive childhood and youth, I mean, you will not have an active and healthy aging. So when do we draw the line? When do we start counting investments in innovation? At what age? No, and a bit to open the debate.
Well, I think this question relates to what we consider to be a part of the active and healthy aging market, right? And one way to look at it is that we don't need necessarily solutions that are made for a certain age group, right? We need solutions to be age inclusive in a way. But what that means is that the solutions usually, if you have a general product, you're designing it for 40-year-olds or 50-year-olds or 30-year-olds, but then you need to find the end users of this perhaps aging population, and then also test on those to have an age-inclusive product, right? So yeah, I don't think that there is a line to be drawn from which we make products only for the aging population. But yeah, I think the age inclusivity is key also in a way that when we talk about stigma towards aging, that sort of also helps to alleviate it, because it's not, it's for everybody.
And yeah, we had in a project very good example, one company who was developing actually their solution for kids, starting with kids, and then they also tried to transfer their solution to elderly people, and then it came up like maybe not quite 100%. You cannot transfer it from one side to another. You have to do some adjustments there. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, initially it was designed for children, the solution.
And with that, we are going to close this discussion. Maybe one last quick comment before we go to the lunch break.
Hello. Yeah, I think your last comment illustrates a big issue here. Actually, you said that the solution was developed for kids and then transferred for elderly, but that's not actually true. It was designed for a specific segment of these kids and a specific segment of these elderlies, and I think we need to think in that way. The elderly population is diverse like the rest of the population, and if you want to go to an investor, you cannot say that you have a solution designed for the elderly people. You need to be extremely specific, and it has nothing to do with age when it comes down to it, really. It has something to do with their state of physical or mental being and the market size. If the market size is good enough and you know that there is traction, then you build all the the pricing strategy, go-to-market strategy, regulatory strategy, and you build that case around that, then you are much more likely to get investments. Mm-hmm. But we start talking about the age population as it's one big target group, and that's simply just not.
It's more based on the problems you need to solve with the solution, and this solution also they started with kids. This is true. They saw the need. They saw the need in kids, and then they moved from one age group to another age group, and you need to adjust your solution for the needs of those age groups anyway. So they had to develop different processes. They had to develop different ways to use the solution, for instance. So, but it started from one point. These were the kids, and now it's developing, and now it also involves women, and it involves also elderly people. So basically, when you start developing a solution, you need to go step by step. You can't fix the world at once. So this is a very good example how you start with this, but you have the wider perspective or the plan how it should look in the ideal world in the future as well.
Which is kind of the introduction that you already made for the next session, where we are going to move away from funding a little bit to actually dive into what does it take to create the solution, how can you assess it, how can you test it through living labs, and where is person-centeredness in this whole mix. I would like to thank our panelists and the audience for all the questions and answers, and we will be back after the break for our next topic on living labs.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your break and are all set for our next topic of today. We dug into the financing aspect of creating solutions and innovations for healthy aging. Now we're going to go, in a way, a step back and talk about how do you even create an innovation, how do you evaluate that it has value and the potential for the market, what are living labs and how they can contribute to the success of solutions, and what's the potential of person-centeredness. I would like to kindly invite the speakers of the next panel to join the stage, so just come up everyone, please. We've got Anni Kurmiste, who's the health policy analyst in Praxis think tank, Gisela Garcia Alvarez, managing director of the Galician Health Cluster. Then we also have Nick Guldemond, renowned professor for healthcare and public health, and also the expert member at the WHO Working Group for Digital Health. And Victor Stephani, chief of staff at Hello Better, which is a German company among the world's leading providers of therapy courses. Welcome, everyone. You can take some time to settle in your seats because, again, we have a question for the audience. And that question is, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the phrase or the word person-centeredness? Again, I would kindly invite you to go to Slido and just write anything that comes to mind when you hear this word. And while you're still thinking, Gisela here is going to share a few thoughts about what we're defining in terms of the innovation, living labs, and person-centeredness in the Info-RH project. So, here you go.
Thank you. So, thank you, everybody. In fact, I think the outcome is probably lessons in its majority. So, through our playbook that we in Work Package 4 and 5, the Work Package 4 was more the part of Living Lab, and Work Package 5 gauging the impact of the different testing solutions into the scalability. We really have a very nice scheme of how it's evolving between like doing really the research and innovation and the prototyping and then again scaling up. But I think we really have lessons that we've learned. Our working package or the testing in Living Lab really implicated all the stakeholders. Everybody, so the regulators and also the providers and investors, but also the users, of course. The person-centeredness that we were betting for it as one of an important key factor to correlate in a way with better scalability and adoption and acceptance of the solution was really There's a trend. As a scientist, I would say there's a trend that it seems that it's important, this person-centeredness. And again, the description of person-centeredness is very broad, so we should enter into that discussion. In the beginning, we decided to do TRL 5 and onwards, so solutions that were almost ready to enter into market, at least the minimal prototype. That was, I wouldn't say a mistake, but I think it's very much required that there are lower TRLs, so the co-creation is really a co-creation from the very beginning, because afterwards, if they really had to change or some implications that or some suggestions that we were telling them, it's not that they didn't want to follow our suggestions, but it really was very expensive to take that suggestions once the project is very advanced and the product or solution is very advanced. So that is a good point to take out. And then, anyway, independent of everything, there needs to be a good business idea behind. So the idea of a good business idea is important. At the end, they want to sell it. And this is last but not least, I would say, the solution really has to answer for a real need. When we were doing the open call and receiving all the different projects or solutions, we realized that many of them didn't answer any need in particular, or they were not addressing it, at least in their pitch, so to say. And it was more, we had the feeling that sometimes they were creating the need. So that is a bit an important part that we experience by testing. Then the person-centeredness also was an important point. Also, because it was important the generation of a community, rather not only person-centered, but I would say community-centered. Everybody needs to be implicated in the testing process, and they need to know what is their role in that testing process, what is going to be the outcome, and what is going to be the return. Not only the user, but also the facilitator that is helping, and also the provider, because we had a lot of really coaching processes in Finland, for example, our colleagues, but also we have also a lot of discussions with the different problems that came up, different feedback, and the main step in our testing process was, first of all, the description of what is the protocol that you really want to take into account, and in order to describe that is, what is the real need you're answering, and what do you really need to get as an answer, and therefore that will help you decide which questions you want to address. And that is the main key, creating this community, so people don't feel like guinea pigs, and in a way it's very important that they really feel that it's something that they might use or be interested in using. The key point also is that in that community idea, the users for us is not only elderly people or plus 55 or plus 65, whatever you want to put the limit, but it's rather the whole community itself. So the formal informal caregivers, even professionals that are working within that sector, and that generated a really a sense of belonging. And that was really good because although Estonians found it very surprising, Spanish, we were very used that in the questionnaires they lie. People tend to lie if they feel that they're not they would say oh, did you use this very well, or was it easy to use this solution? Of course, if the other person next to it answered yes, or they would feel oh, me as well, and they would lie. Actually, it's not that they lie, but they actually change a bit their truth, their reality. It's how they feel it also, because the person-centeredness is not only trying to address the solution for the person, putting yourself in their shoes, but also understanding, is that even necessary for them, or are they interested in testing this because they find it important to their life, everyday lives, and what makes the difference between somebody feeling fulfilled in their life and somebody not. It's not only about testing gadgets, it's also about understanding which is the ideal user for that. And the advantage of creating a network is that you have at least a big pool to where to pick from, and that is why the idea of generating a network of living labs, also considering different cultures. It's not the same for a Spanish what is respect or what is value, care for a Spanish than for a Finnish, and what is loneliness for a Spanish and for a Finnish, for example, the two living labs that we have, and that is a very interesting process that we had. So lessons were what we get.
Thank you, Gisela. Let's see what the audience said, what they understand or what they think about when we say person-centeredness. Empathy, usability was the main one. What matters to me? User-friendliness, personal approach. So you mentioned several interesting things, that it's not just about putting yourselves in the shoes of someone else, that it's a broad term. So just for the sake of this panel, can we define very more concretely what is person-centeredness, so we know what we talk about? You know, how does it relate to user-centeredness? How does it relate to patient-centeredness, customer-centeredness? Where is person-centeredness in this story?
I would say these last 2 days I had the definition of person-centeredness when we prepared, but in these two, in the EIT matchmaking, I changed because I found I encountered with a living lab from France, and he was saying it's not only about considering the person. For example, the definition we have is really making the protocol of testing, taking into care the respect for the person, the implication of the person, the empathy for the person. But it's not only that. It's really what that person wants and likes, and really if they are willing to test something or not. And so for me, person-centeredness is really being capable of putting together all the different personalities and needs that we have and try to include as much as possible in that process and really explain in the best way and communicate in the best way why are you doing that, what is that you're doing that, and what do you expect in the outcome, and what is going to be actually the role of that person. It's really, really important. Like, you're going to be here in the testing, but then we are going to also tell you the results, and maybe if the ministry comes and they want to actually dedicate the money for this, then you will be engaged in the whole process if you want also as well.
Yeah, a very good understanding of how because many solutions can be very useful if they are used. So you have to understand what is it that makes them usable. And the next question, again for the audience, and this is what we're going to talk about too, is what do you think about, or how would you define living labs? So let's see what kind of answers we get here again on Slido. And then I will ask Nick, who is the expert for living labs and actually founded the first hospital-based open innovation living lab, to kind of comment and share his definition. Based on the responses that we're getting, which are coming in very slowly, I would say that I'm proud of this question, because it seems that we have to clarify it a lot. So kind of the thoughts go to testing, collaborative design, to make sure that something works in practice. Nick, perhaps you can help out, and we'll follow through with the things that are still coming up on Slido. But so what are living labs according to your definition?
Well, I suppose because the topic and the aspects related to the living lab are quite broad. It can be a sort of user, a sort of audience, the setting, the sort of overall topics, etc. So I think it's a very broad and abstract definition. But I think if we now looking, and if you allow me, looking 20 years back, in the early days of open innovation, how the convergence of technology, design, business, to health, medical and social aspects, how it merged into a relevant context for developing solutions. I think from this times, the sort of idea originate on how can we make better use of an environment, whether it's a hospital or a community, or a more sort of policy environment, in order to co-create solutions together. And also at that time, this open innovation came up as a sort of principle, which really opened up and made the relevance for different actors, a multidisciplinary, more clear on how you can be stronger to create solutions with facilities from other partners, outside organizations, through knowledge, etc. It was the times where this sort of IT sort of developments took place and how to tailor solution to users. And this was also a strong, I think, development in this idea on we should engage with users, but in a relevant environment. So that I think the whole concept of a living lab was also the result of different developments which happening in the society and in innovation, etc. So we learned a lot, I think, from how to engage with all kinds of stakeholders in order to address typical issues. We had this sort of service design and user involvement sort of developments, which learned about how what does it take, different methodologies, how to create a success. And also about the sort of co-creation sort of ideas and principles. So they came together, and I think Living Lab described a sort of, okay, we use a relevant setting. Although I think currently we have a lot of examples for Living Labs for different topics, for different audience, different settings. I think still we have now, I think, lessons to learn for further societal impact. Because usually, I think despite the good examples and in solutions or the good examples of settings successful, you see the concept of a living lab is sometimes nothing more than just a project or a program. Sometimes very narrow, sometimes it's more the hobby horse of a professor rather than focusing on needs of people and etc. And similar, I think, to what we see in integrated care and patient-centeredness, user-centeredness. It's more the question, how do you align the different aspects in order to provide the best care of the best solution for the patients? So, and I think this is quite challenging. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we know there are a lot of methodologies and aspects, research, and which are useful to make it happen. But I think still we have work to do in what's more, let's say, the regional or ecosystem context.
A lot of this was actually researched through the Info-Raha project. If I would try to summarize what we see also from the Slido results, it's all about testing in the real environment, collaborating with the end users and innovators. And actually, Anni, throughout the whole project, a person-centeredness focused questionnaire for service providers was developed and tested throughout the project. And what I'm kind of wondering here is, given everything that was said so far, how was this questionnaire accepted by service providers? To which extent is this a must? Something that you simply can't avoid anymore, because it's also very demanding when you collect feedback and then you are kind of forced to actually do something about it, which is not simple. So what were the results based on the project?
Yeah, before talking about assessment framework, I would like to take a step back. We held a seminar, web seminar on this topic as well, and also conducted a questionnaire on this topic. So the results showed that impact evaluation and also person-centered focus is really important to service providers. It is important to go get funding afterwards or just to develop their solutions. And the results quite effectively showed that this is an important topic. So the next step was for us to develop the person-centered impact evaluation questionnaire. And we developed it based on the previous developments of the project, the outputs of the project, also feedback from all different service providers and stakeholder groups. And we also developed it based on theoretical models and from the World Health Organization, for example.
And so the questionnaire was designed for 3 stakeholder groups: the user or end user, also the facilitator, and the service provider also. So different stakeholder groups. And we also tested it with our good friends from Work Package 4. The results showed that the framework and the questionnaire was useful. It helped assess the person-centered approach that their solutions have. It definitely is important to mention that it does need more testing to give really concrete and specific results. However, in conclusion, it can be mentioned that it was important. It was important for them to analyze this, and the person-centeredness focus is usually very important for solution providers. In addition to cost effectiveness and so on.
Basically, everything that we talked about so far is focused on how can we help solutions and innovations become successful in the shortest possible time with not too many failures. Victor, and I think this is a great cue for you. So you're coming from Germany, and Germany already has a very nice framework for digital health solutions, more specifically digital therapeutics, to get reimbursed by all health insurance companies. Could you share some of the experiences that you had as a company with the DIGA framework, which basically requires every innovator to go to the regulator, design a clinical study together, and if that clinical study is successful, then you can get on the framework of reimbursable applications?
Sure, yes, a lot of questions again.
Your experience, one question.
Yeah, you mentioned that we offer digital therapeutics. Let me clarify it a little bit more. We offer mental health therapeutics. So we have like 5 DIGAs on the market. That means 5 products which are reimbursed for all patients, members in the statutory health insurance systems. And therefore, we are very, very experienced with this new DIGA fast track in Germany. And our studies we conducted for the fast track are completely digital. So the advantage of mental disease studies is that you do a lot of patient-reported outcome measuring. So we use validated questionnaires, and these questionnaires can be done via the mobile phone, via the internet, so the patient doesn't have to come to a clinic in order to go through the trial. This is a very huge advantage. Still, the trials are very expensive, and once you are in the DIGA system, once you are approved as a DIGA, that's what we are realizing right now. The story is not ended yet, because we need to negotiate the price with the insurance. And the insurance compares you as a DIGA manufacturer, as the digital therapeutics manufacturer, always with these apps which are freely on the market, which cost €0. So insurance doesn't want to pay more than €5 per product, per license. But we have prices like €600, €500. And it's very difficult to explain to an insurance company how difficult it is to develop and sustain and maintain a digital therapeutic in Germany and in the world. And this is the first big problem after you got listed as a digital therapeutic. The second one is that although DIGAs are patient-centered, they have to be patient-centered, you need to think physician and doctor-centered. What we are currently experiencing is that all our resources go into the sales team. So we hire a big sales team, which is comparable to a pharmaceutical company, and they go out to the doctors and they tell them about our DIGAs, they explain our DIGAs, and then the doctor prescribes the DIGAs hopefully to the patients, because if you just list it as a DIGA, no one will prescribe you, and the patient doesn't benefit. And that is a big problem, because everyone thought in the beginning, okay, this new system in Germany will empower the patients, will be patient-centered, etc., etc. And now we are back in the old world, and we have this doctor-centeredness again. This is, I'm not sure whether I answered all your questions now, but
you answered more than enough for me to ask Nick for a comment. So, you created a hospital-based living lab. How do you see this challenge, that there's still a gap between the innovators, the end users, the doctors, and everybody involved in the end result of improved care?
Yes, thank you very much. No, I think it's a very important problem. So what I tried to explain in my first comment was, so we learned a lot about methodologies, engagement of patients, development of solution, etc., etc. Also get the financing in. But when it comes to implementation and market uptake, there are still significant issues. And that's, for example, like, okay, now we have companies who have a sort of proven solution, which could be described by several other professionals. And the sort of distribution or dissemination of these sort of solutions, possible solutions and services is a problem to reach out. And so that explains also a little bit the immaturity of this whole implementation upscaling strategy for different reasons. But one of the sort of challenges is a sort of approved system, and also the way how professionals, not only doctors, but nurses, might be social workers or even informal carers, how they get an understanding about, okay, this is very useful, this is a proven product, this is how it works for an individual professional or in collaboration. So all these sort of topics on getting the sort of message through, and how does it work, and actually that people are going to use it, that is still a thing which is not well organized and in a very efficient way. So I think here it comes more on the systems barriers and problems. This is not only an issue from a single provider or an innovation sort of community within a university or somewhere else. It's more also how we organize markets, how we organize information exchange in markets and sort of promotion. And like digital products, which are sort of in a certified system, is not the same as what we have in a retail market. It works a little bit differently also when it comes to maybe reimbursement. So that is one of the topics we should, of course, address with national governments, because this is often a national responsibility, but also with European. And this touch a little bit on the complexity we are currently in with the sort of making the impact of living labs and accordingly the solutions, how to scale up. And that's more at, let's say, a systems level on national sort of leadership and responsibilities, as well as the European leadership and responsibilities. So I think that is something where we should focus on how to improve this.
Mm-hmm. Gisela, throughout the project, there were actually 6 living labs, a network of 6 centers that have in common the provision of services for the elderly. So these centers worked as living labs. What were the findings, experiences, or anything that you learned based on the collaboration with these centers? To which extent did they differ? What were kind of the common things that you can gather from the project?
I think the project was a real proof that we really need to collaborate, and that collaboration is not easy. We actually have in ITCAL network, which is our social care living labs, 8 living labs, but only 6 participated because of the characteristics of the users and the type of solutions that we wanted to test. But I think it was positive, the outcome, and that's why they still follow within this network. The reason being that we don't oblige anybody to be in the network, but we want that the added value of getting together is very clear. And one of the added value is, of course, that CSG, so the Galician Health Cluster, is actually leading the ITGAL as a service first. And before you did a spoiler about the public help on the Living Lab, so we are for the moment running still this Living Lab. And we are looking for different European projects or regional funding that we have to help us match sometimes our mistakes or our errors or our miscalculations of what are the costs of testing and what are the costs sometimes that we have to stop something, we have to kill it as soon as possible, and sometimes that is hard to actually say, this is really not going to work. And it's difficult to say for many reasons, but also because we don't get the money to test it, but I think it's more honest. So the idea of bonding together was to actually get this umbrella of the CSG, to get a coordination that is external and it doesn't depend on any of the different Living Labs. Getting the full pool of different users that we have on this Living Lab, different ways of working, but we unite them in one single protocol, one single indicators, and one single report all together. And they actually collaborate, so the provider or whoever wants to test doesn't really realize this, who are they working with or who are the users belonging to, but rather, well, belong is not the word, but I don't know how to say it in another way, they are associated with. But actually they have a very direct communication with the Living Lab manager. So the way we organize it, the structure is very important to actually make it coordinated. And the report is one single report in which everybody has participated. And there's a follow-up. So I think the providers are quite happy on that. There has been providers that have actually told us that they reduced in 6 months their need of time to actually get the CE certificate. So that's very, very nice. And also they have been saying it has been very useful, your inputs, and we also help them with the particularities of our Spanish health system or Spanish social care system, rather. And that's why we also collaborate not only with Living Lab, but with other companies and providers that could help in the pitches, could help in coaching, could help in other services. And that's why in Infora, we were actually in collaboration with Champa Living Lab from Finland, and they actually did provide all this coaching for the Nordic market, so to say. So it's really interesting because actually from one thing that we're trying to enroll is also our public administration to also understand the value, and actually I hope that we demonstrate by now that there's a value. And we are trying to get the experience of testing in Living Lab as a pre-experience for a tender. So when you actually go to a tender, they will ask you, oh, what is, have you tested this somewhere in the country? And then they are actually accepting it, and many of our regional funding for helping some, especially technological projects, they actually do the testing with us in ITGAL, and for the Digital Innovation Hub that we have, we are also we provide the service test before invest, so before they invest. So I think that's an important part of learning how to collaborate. It hasn't been easy, and we are not perfect at all yet, yeah. But we're moving towards there. So.
We've got 2 minutes left before we will check if there are any questions from the audience. If you have any questions, please write them down into Slido. Those who are here with us live will be able to ask the questions by just getting the microphone. But in that last minute that we still have, Anni, Gisela talked a lot about testing, and impact evaluation was also a part of the project. What were the key recommendations or findings there?
The key findings were definitely that impact evaluation should be a part of the design process, the development process of solutions throughout the process, so every step of the way. There is always some kind of impact or some kind of process to evaluate. And it is key to go forward or develop the solution further, because in the end it is important, as Gisela mentioned in the first part of the discussion, that the solution needs to fit a need, and you will find out if the solution fits a need through impact evaluation or evaluation in general.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Please don't be shy, because otherwise I will ask Victor. So you mentioned that you have 5 digas several solutions for mental health. How did you expand the solutions that you have and went from one to the other, testing of one, evaluation of one, figuring out what the next one could be? How did that whole development look like?
Our 5 DIGAs, our products, were assessed and evaluated in randomized controlled trials several years ago. And so we are in university spin-off, maybe that's a very important information, we are a university spin-off. All our products were developed through the university projects and then was decided to make Hello Better out of it. So these RCTs are sometimes 8 years old, 7 years old. And in the process of getting a DIGA, we needed to prove to the BfArM, this is the authority in Germany who assesses the DIGA application, we needed to prove to them that the product hasn't significantly changed from 7 years ago to now. Of course, it has changed in some aspects, but the basic components, they haven't changed. Like the basic therapeutic components are still the same. For example, for our sleep DIGA, the therapeutic components are exactly the same as 7 years ago. And this helped us to use an RCT, which is quite old in the digital world, for this regulatory or this market access. This is one of our biggest assets, that we have a lot of RCTs conducted with our products. This is the most important aspect for the BfArM, for getting market access in Germany, that you are having the evidence. The product, if something is wrong with your data protection or the product itself, you can always, most of the time, change it. You can adapt it within the next release, within 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. But if you have something wrong with if you didn't conduct the proper study, if something is wrong with your study, if there's a bias in your study, you can't change the data, you can't change it. And that's why it's important to have good conducted RCTs, and then one of the biggest blockers is gone for the market access, at least in Germany. That's how it works there, yes.
Any brave people to ask any questions? Going from what was just explained, I really wonder, from Gisela and from Nick, how do you see that, given everything that was already explained, research projects can become products? Victor mentioned that basically all the products that they have came from the university setting. So how could we expand that, see that more often?
You start.
University hospital centers. Yeah, well. How can they leverage more?
Well, yes, I think it's one way, one channel how to work on solutions. However, I think if you're looking also, for example, the Netherlands, we have the sort of Dutch innovation paradox, which means if you look to our country, our infrastructure, digital, healthcare, access to funding, expertise, etc., so we have a lot of ingredients there in order to make it work. Although a lot of these sort of living lab initiatives, universities, etc., startups, are so much focusing on particular elements in this innovation. And for the academia, obviously, it's mostly focusing on research output and not so much on making real solutions for people. It's often the lip service. But actually, if you look into the results, we could have been doing much better. And it's also understandable because all the incentives for the different parties are focusing on research and scientific excellence. And I think this also has its influence on who a lot of these initiatives are performing. So I think we can do better. And I think what's important in this is also the sort of barriers we have into this market uptake. Because the same that applies to, let's say, apps, but also to integrated care concepts. Because if you have a certain focus, for example, on diabetes, you have an app and you want to implement it in an existing system, you have to do a lot more in order to implement it and to make it a sort of acceptable solution within a region or a country, which is much more complex than just only the development. And therefore, it's also understandable that a lot of the stakeholders are going not much further than just the, let's say, the concept or the solution development, but the uptake is lagging. So I think better sort of thinking how we can create this sort of adaptation also by the clinicians, the professionals, but also more in general how we as governments organize markets. I think that that's really a key issue to make the impact stronger.
And we got a question from the audience that maybe you can continue to answer to. The question is, how do you reconcile the different timeline expectations between public and private sectors, which is basically what you alluded to, the difference between the expectations investors might have, the actual capabilities of innovators, SMEs or startups, to bring innovation on the market where the policy is not even there to support what they are creating. So I will repeat the question and you can decide who's going to answer it. The question was, how do you reconcile the different timeline expectations between public and private sectors?
If I may, so I think there are two elements to be said on this. First, if you look has a predictability in order to market uptake, or a certain predictability is important for investors, public or private. But that are you investing in certain development that you have a sort of idea, okay, there will be a return on investment in the long run, etc. And therefore you need a very seamless sort of approach from development in order to, and the uptake part, the market part. And so this comes back on how do you organize market and the whole process. Concerning IT and platforms, I think we can do much better. There have been some developments in how to standardize and harmonize platforms in sort of digital solutions, but we should do better. The other thing is I think also if you look to the investor sort of behavior, and particularly in startups, there's also something which the investors are investing in startups with a wonderful marketing story, which are very unlikely to get to the market and change healthcare for real. But just on the idea of just idea marketing, there's a sort of business model for investors with a sort of the greater fool is next to invest, and that's how you get your business as an early investor. So also on the investor side, I think there should be a discussion on how to tackle this, because more than 95% of the startups don't reach the market eventually. So this is also requires from more the, let's say, the startups and the innovators, but also the investors. Okay, how can we work also on a different way to make the market more successful for uptake? So I think it's both on the more public and user side, as well as the financial side, where you see some behaviors and incentive which currently complicate the market.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to close this discussion because we have another one coming up right after this one. So thank you all the speakers for sharing your insights and the findings from the project. And with that, I would kindly invite the speakers for the next panel discussion to join the stage. Okay. So in the next session, we are going to talk about the harmonization of regulations, health data for active and healthy aging, and of course, again, to wake up the audience a little bit, we have a question again. And the question is, how would you estimate your organization's capacity to comply with EU-initiated regulations on data management we made it a little bit simpler this time, so there's just 3 choices to choose from. And we will come back to this question and results of the poll after the initial presentation by Hille Hinsberg. Hille is an expert in open government and digital services and currently works with Proud Engineers, which is a consultancy that helps governments and large corporations with their digital infrastructure and data governance challenges. Hille, what were the findings from the work package 5? Can you share them with us?
Hello everyone, and I hope your attention is still with us. So taking you through the data governance and regulations, the 2 very, I would say, complicated notions in themselves. Before I'm going to tell you about the findings or the actual outputs, I would like to lead us all into the domain by telling why we tackled this topic in the first place. So now we know, all of us stakeholders here in the audience and out there, that there is a very significant change ahead of us. The newly proposed or adopted or in the pipeline package coming from the European Commission will shake and stir forever the realm of data governance, including for the digital health and care business, but not only. So just to illustrate this significant change from the point of view of a person, a user, a patient, what can a person then start doing? The package, for example, gives individuals the right to access their own personal health data, electronic health data, but not only to control who has access and who does not have access, and also to transmit their own data from one healthcare or service provider to another. So this is from the shoes of the service user. So it implies that for any organization within the ecosystem, but especially I would say the provider of either healthcare service or the technology that supports providing the healthcare service, they will need to address these enablers. So I saw the term compliance. GDPR was about and is about compliance. I would say that this package is about enablers and giving opportunities. For example, they also bring to the service providers then the need to completely raise the bar of data management within their own organization. They would need to be ready with their capabilities that they probably don't even have or they haven't thought of until now. They will need to perhaps make significant investments in order to grant this success, to enable the transmission and transferring of data the way that the patient or the user sees it necessary. And of course, last but not least, to really make the room, the space, the health data space function, meaning the sharing for the reuse purposes. So it takes a lot from the innovators on the ground that have already on the market their products and services. So the important point why I'm telling it is that this context, these external challenges and enablers and opportunities can only come into force when we address the internal data policies and data operations within the organization. And this is the focus that we put in the project, in the work package. So we try to be helpful with our outputs and outcomes in order to assist the currently on the market actors to take a thorough systemic look on how their data management is currently functioning. And we did have some evidence background to why we chose the topics that you can find in the guidebook and in the toolbox. Namely, I'm referring to the initiative TEHDAS. I suppose you all know it's the cross-European initiative to promote secondary health data use that I think Jukka will tell us all about. But for cross-border data exchange, they found out earlier this year that the innovators, the service providers all over Europe said that they are experiencing challenges coming from the regulations. 50% said that it's very problematic. This is maybe the compliance part, but 30%, one-third said that they experience problems coming from data management. It's just the thing that they are not completely sure what data they have, where does it reside, how does it move, how can be stored, changed, shared, archived, and given access to. And these are the points, these are the elements that the work package addressed. So how to manage people, technologies, processes in order to make the internal housekeeping a better one.
With those 50%, you really made me wonder what the results of our poll are. Just before we go to those results, I would like to just quickly introduce the other panelists. So we've got Liina Joller-Vahter, who's the guest researcher at the University of Tartu, and also contributing to EIT Health Scandinavia's team with her experience on accelerating innovation in the healthcare sector. We've got Jukka Lähesmaa, who's the consulting officer for the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health in Finland, and Karolina Mackiewicz, Innovation Director of the European Connected Health Alliance Group. Welcome and thank you for joining this discussion. Now let's look at the results. What does it look like?
Okay, that's very good.
Yeah, but good results. Most people feel like they know the regulations. 36% of the participants of the poll said that they're not yet fully aware of the regulatory requirements, but nobody said that they're not ready at all. So let's start the debate. And perhaps, Hille, we can start with you. You mentioned that everything is going to change. You indicated that. So I'm wondering, for the better or for the worse, if we look at the challenges with GDPR and the interpretation of GDPR, what are your expectations of the European health data space and the regulatory changes that are coming?
I think we are talking about harmonization here. So perhaps we can have a discussion what can be harmonized and what really needs to be harmonized. Because we know that when we are talking about healthcare on one hand and data on another hand, healthcare will not be harmonized in Europe, right? The business model is going to stay very different and diverse across countries and even within the country between regions. So when we are talking about harmonizing data policies and how this is going to be functioning on the market, we can be really technical. For example, I can wager, I can put my bet that the infrastructure in some way will be harmonized. In what way is still a mystery, and I think in Estonia we are really hesitant in harmonizing to a lower level. Sorry to say that, but we probably don't want to take over anything that will be centrally provided if our own data exchange layer is not part of it, because it's really the backbone of the digital society that we have here. But the ways that this infrastructure can be used consists of agreements. Agreement on technical standards, on data quality standards, on the ways that de-identification will work, by meaning taking your personal data non-personal in whatever way, then this probably needs to be harmonized. And of course, and I know TEHDAS is already working on the guidance, the quality of data. How can we be sure that the data collected from a family doctor in Galicia and from a big hospital in Sweden, that they can actually be used for the reuse purposes.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about data and privacy, we immediately touch upon the challenge with trust. So, Liina, perhaps here you can add and pitch in with your findings around how is the sentiment around these debates related to trust changing and evolving?
Yeah, here really I can relate to my broader knowledge of innovation, adoption and diffusion, and trust is a central thing. I mean, it can be quite often that we have all the regulatory and managerial things in place, but still innovations don't diffuse. So we need to obtain trust of patients, of doctors, of healthcare providers more broadly, as well as the politicians. And reliable data is a key enabler in creating this trust.
Mm-hmm. I'm really glad that we have Jukka here with us from Finland, so we can dive into a very practical example of data governance questions related to secondary use of data, which Finland already has. So can you talk a little bit more about FinData, how you ensure the trust, what kind of data is gathered, and how is that data then used and offered for the use for secondary purposes?
Yes, thank you. First of all, really happy to be here. Some background information. In Finland, we have been utilizing our quite good and extensive digital health records for quite a long time now. But some years ago, we noticed that we are not fully utilizing those for the secondary purposes, meaning research, innovation, other development, also policy and decision making. And we realized that we have to do something. So we started to work with our act on the secondary use of social and health data. And in May 2019, we established this new act. And then, there are two main purposes for the act. First of all, to have both public and private organizations to really have the access to this data for the secondary purposes, but also that this highly confidential data is treated as it should be in secure manners. And also based on the act, we did establish a new authority, the so-called Data Permit Authority FinData. And when the situation was such earlier that when the research scientist or other customer wanted to have access to the data, they had to separately knock each of the different doors of the different organizations in Finland. But now FinData is the organization that can provide you the permit to all of the data registers in Finland for the different organizations. But FinData is not only giving you the permit, but it's also collecting the data from the different organizations and registers, combining it and providing it into these dedicated, secure IT environments. And the research scientist can then utilize the data within the limits of these environments, however he or she wants, but they are not able to extract the data from there. So that allows them also to have access to the very confidential or personal level data.
So anyone who wants to do some research only gets results out of the data, but not the data?
No. They are having access to the real data, and it can be also personal level data if it's needed for the study.
How did you manage to get the public trust in order to establish something like this?
That is, of course, a good question. But in general, we Finns, we have quite high trust in the policymakers and the authorities, and we also are very technology and research positive people. So there was the existing trust that was built for decades already that made it possible for us to have this kind of act passed in our parliament.
If I may, it's really, really important that the trust is so vital, as Liina put it, but it might come from very minute technological or institutional arrangements, which is, I think, that the Finnish case is teaching us.
Karolina, not every country is Finland, so what does the ECHA Alliance observe in terms of the biggest barriers for sharing data, regulation, technology?
I must admit that I actually live in Finland and I'm a Finn since 2019, so I would say that, also as a new Finn, and that something works in Finland and there is a good level of trust. But coming back to the question and about the barriers, so if we think about the regulations, technology, business cases, or is it a trust, I think it's a bit of everything. In relation to regulations, we saw it also from our poll. Not everyone is always like, we know that there is this regulation coming, enabling, but is it enabling? Do we really know what is there? Do we have legal knowledge to really unpack this tsunami of legislation and navigate this tsunami and really pick what is needed from all this? I think there is still not enough maybe discussion on really what this means. And we, even with GDPR, even after so many years of having GDPR, I still met the researchers and innovators who said the GDPR is killing innovation. And of course we also see how different countries interpret it differently. But this will bring me to the conclusion, so I will share this shortly. Then the technology, of course, I think I hear from many developers that, well, technology is not a problem, we have it all solved, actually. We really are ready. It's maybe a bit fragmented, but it's fragmented because of regulation and standards. Then about the business value or business model, we all know that the current business models don't work for the new reality, but we still didn't figure out what those new business models are. We are a bit stuck, and it feels that, we're a bit like, we don't evolve. Like we had communism, we had capitalism, and then we don't know really what is next. So we are maybe the new era that we are talking about, that we are entering a new era, maybe this will actually help us to enter this. And then we have trust, but then I'm thinking about trust in terms of how we can trust something that we don't know. Actually, me and my colleague just published the blog post about this, how we can trust that the regulation is enabling us, our activities, if we really don't necessarily understand how. So I would touch on the trust in this way. So then also maybe coming to the biggest barrier that connects it all, I think it's, after all, it's a mindset. It's really how we see the things, and we can have the same regulation in the EU that works for some countries, that things are possible, like in some countries, and then some countries are still lagging behind. And I think you caught this very well in the data governance guidebook, that you pointed that we need culture and values, competences, organization, and leadership and management. And I think that if we want to really wrap it up, all this is mindset, actually. So of course, in how I read this, how I interpret this, that is really, but I think culture and values is really the building stone, and we have to work on this to enable our innovations, to enable regulations, and to read those regulations as enablers.
Hille, perhaps you can continue here. The data governance guidebook is one of the outputs of the project. It's available. Who would you recommend it to, and what would you say are some of the key things that are in it, in terms of how companies or just anyone that deals with data should look at governments? What kind of resources are required to do it properly?
Yes, I'm beginning with the fact that we did write the guidebook, but there is also a more easily digestible version, a format that we call Toolbox, that is together with the evidence building, which also requires data to be collected, handled, stored, and then data management. And to begin with very practical things, GDPR is about protecting the privacy and keeping the data safe. So we give advice on how to actually do it. How do you gain control? So beginning from data flow inside the organization and then pinpointing the places in the process where when you capture the data, you already apply some kind of description or some kind of quality criteria to it. And that is what I was referring to, that these kind of criteria and standards for sure can be harmonized all over Europe, so that each and every one of the service providers, innovators, technology people really would know how to do it. So how to keep data safe inside the organization, which only means that if you can control it internally, you will be able to share it for some other purpose. The other way doesn't function. You cannot go around and exchanging all sorts of data without having this control first. So again, the processes of even to the storage, what is the right place and the right ways to keep it safe, to have control. And we even went to listing all the possible positions, like the functions, that you need to have some kind of competencies at hand, whether in-house or you need to reach out to your supporting systems, the business support organizations, but really to get the assistance to make sure that again, I'm using the word housekeeping, but this is what data management really is, that it's really functioning, which is getting you only ready to share and reuse for the purposes of innovation, research or policy making. It doesn't mean necessarily that you should start doing it immediately, but this is the initial layer, and the guidebook hopefully helps to find your way through this labyrinth of pretty complicated business processes. But we mean data governance, we took it as creating value. And what is the value? First of all, it's the business value. It's purely the business growth and sustainability. But as we heard from the previous panel here, of course, the business sustainability comes from creating a benefit and impact for the end users and for other stakeholders. So they are intertwined. But this is the ultimate purpose that the data management needs to serve.
Jukka, earlier you mentioned that FinData not just collects the data, but also does some of the cleaning or harmonization of the data. So from that perspective and looking at the European health data space, how do you see the efforts to derive data standards? To which extent should we go into the direction of trying to convince as many organizations as possible to use the same standards, and to which extent is perhaps the approach of having the authority that does the whole harmonization a better approach? What would you say based on the Finnish example?
Yeah, of course there are many different aspects that we need to harmonize and standardize. And from our perspective, the first priority would be harmonize the standard procedures for exchanging the data and for those IT environments where we are able to manage the data. So in Finland we have these requirements for those secure IT environments where we can locate the personal level data for research and other secondary purposes. But we would need the same harmonized, standardized requirements all over Europe for these in the IT environments. So we would be able to borrow our data to Estonia and to the other European countries. We would love to do that, but at the moment we are not able to do that because the Estonians, they are not able to provide us such a certificate that we have this kind of IT environment that meets these requirements.
Secure processing.
Yes, secure processes, secure IT environments. When you have that certificate, we are happy to borrow our data.
If I can do something, let me know.
Perhaps a comment from Karolina. So from the European Connected Health Alliance, what are the debates that you're having around this topic? Sometimes we are also then starting to think about what if the individual would be the one that has all the data and would carry it around. So how much can we as individuals influence the sharing of the healthcare data, and what are some of the discussions that you are having around this topic?
Yeah, let me still come back to our comment, because that's also the discussion we have within the ECH Alliance or the Global Health Connector Partnership on the topic of access to data, that some researchers are telling us, like, it's easier for us to get the data from China or from States than actually from Finland or from Europe, and we have to work on the data to do something, not on the that necessarily represent the population that we are serving. So this is really, really something very important. And then coming back to the individual as the data subject, I think that it's really important. We spoke about the patient centricity, and of course, patient centricity is a big topic on the European, I think also global agenda, but it's also one of those never-ending conversations. So I really would like this to be implemented or operationalized, but maybe also from the perspective of the citizen centricity, so really taking us into account. And then I was thinking actually about this what is our responsibility of what we can do as the data subjects. And I think we all want probably to have really good services. We all benefit from having Google Maps and all this being interoperable when we are traveling abroad or even in our own country. I think we all understand that when we travel abroad, that having access, that the other doctor in the other country can have access to our health records from our countries would be valuable in case of when something happens. We all know that getting the prescription, buying the medications when we are somewhere else than in our country would make sense. So I was just thinking, why we have to debate this? Let's be just egoistic and being on the level of wherever we can do in our organizations, in the government, in wherever we are located. Let's just do it. If we don't do it for the sake of the whole humanity, let's just do it for ourselves and, our friends and family, that when we travel to Estonia or elsewhere, we can actually get the good quality healthcare. So I think, we just need to, want to have it. And I think we all, based on all the surveys that we see, people are eager to share their data. So I think that we have to go from this level, do people want? Yes, people want. So now we have to be as empowered professionals to actually make this happen.
2 questions for Liina at this point. So to which extent are you observing that basically convenience triumphs over trust and the concerns about privacy, and then perhaps maybe you can also share a little bit about what were the key findings from the second work package around all these issues that we just debated.
Okay, let's come back to the first one. So convenience over trust. It is definitely the case that
I guess how many people read privacy policies in terms of use?
Close to 0, probably. Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's so broad topic, really, and it it comes back to the levels of trust and also to different institutions in the broader societal context. But I think it's the question that relates to more broadly to the common good, as we understand in economics. So as a society, we cannot exist when we don't have trust at all. And we also know that the more trust we have, the more efficiently the society actually runs, and the cheaper the general costs for keeping up or managing the society are. So on personal level, of course, it relates back to previous experiences with a particular service provider, data handler, or let's say even government as such in general.
Hille, you had a comment.
Yeah, I think I'm more into certificates, security standards, high-level qualification, authentication, all the necessary things that engineers know how to do, how to check, how to verify, how to be responsible for it. We don't need to understand exactly the details, how it's taken care of. But just to give you an example from another domain, you probably know that Estonia is e-voting, is electronically voting, and half of all the votes cast are made in digital way. And we have never looked back, because the trust is again in the technical, verified, validated, checked, double-checked, and monitored. It's the technological plus organizational trust built by default into the system. And absolutely the same attitude, the mindset, plus the practicalities are, I think, should be the backbone of the exchange and processing environment in healthcare, when the delicate data is, in my view, pretty much the same as our democratic data, or the way that we choose for our governments to be run and for our parliaments. So if this can be done for democracy, I'm sure it can be done for health.
A quick comment by Karolina and then Liina.
This trust over convenience, I think that this should be embedded. It should be like, we should take this lesson also from public health, that healthy choice should be an easy choice. We should not have to think twice. Like Hille said, like, we don't have to know, but it should be that wherever I do this, I should, like, if it's a label or something, like, trusted solution.
Yeah. Labeling is good.
Exactly.
Yes. Just another comment about why the data is important. I think the key issue is in innovation generally, also in healthcare, is about validation. And it's important to understand that in healthcare specifically, we need to validate it against the existing solutions, both in medical terms as well as in economic terms. So, and this is one of the challenges what I see also with the broader harmonization goal, that currently the levels are different. So what the new solution needs to compete with, the current state of art is already different in different countries, and that's a major, let's say, challenge and opportunity in implementing the new EHTS regulations.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
We have.
We have, okay, good. We also got one on Slido. We have a question there.
Okay, is it working? Jukka, I have a question for you. First of all, I just looked up Helsinki, about how the two cities are cooperating so much. And when I moved from Finland to Tallinn, I'm okay, everything's fine with me. But my daughter, who's a Finnish citizen, moved here, and the health system couldn't wait more than a week to say, good riddance to you. You're not in the Finnish health system. But the Estonian health system said, well, if you're not making money, we don't want you. So basically, my daughter is a permanent citizen here, so she's neither covered by, a resident, sorry. She's neither covered by Finland nor Estonia. So I'm just wondering, we're always talking about how they're cooperating and exchanging information and twin cities, but yet here's an example of somebody until she gets a permanent job, and she does have a few problems with that, she's not covered. So I hate to think what happens if she gets really sick. So is there something of this cooperation that you know about, or?
Well, that might be a little bit out of my specialty, but I can ensure that if something happens, severe happens to your daughter in Helsinki, she will be treated, no matter if she's covered by the insurance or not.
If she gets in an accident, should I bandage her up and put her on the ship so she gets to Helsinki? If she gets in an accident, should I ship her over to Helsinki or what? I'm just curious, the cooperation between the two cities don't seem to be, you know,
well, of course, I'm not able to say anything about the Estonian side, but I'm pretty sure that if it's something that needs immediate action, she will be treated also here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. It's I guess it's a specific case that needs to be looked into. Another question that we got is about other EU initiatives that work on secondary use of data. So apart from FinData, can panelists share a little bit more about any other initiatives that you're aware of about the secondary use of data?
As concerns me, FinData is the data access institution, independent, but having the right to facilitate access to public registries. Similar one is in France. It's called Health Data Hub. Of the other countries, I'm not so sure, but what I'm sure is that the initiative that I named, TEHDAS, that unites the European countries, is currently piloting at least 5 cases or 5 pilots to test out how really the regulation, the health data space, with all its guiding principles and the criteria and standards, how it would work in each and every of these cross-border data exchange cases. I suppose similar to what is needed to transfer data from one healthcare insurance to another. This is also cross-border data exchange. So I know they are ongoing, so I cannot say what the results or what the findings are, but I feel that this is the way that it should be tested out. It's needs-based, it's use case-based, and then the learnings can be scaled up or at least taken into consideration when tweaking and adapting the actual application of the regulations.
May I also add briefly that this kind of a piloting is really needed, because from our experience is that you need the approach, the solutions to be flexible enough. One of our learnings was that we have tried to make too centralized system in Finland, and we might be going a little bit backward from that. There are so many different user cases, there are so many different healthcare systems in Europe that there needs to be flexibility when we are going further.
Before we wrap up this session, Liina, can you take us through some of the key findings from the second work package? What kind of stood out for you in terms of maybe any things that surprised you?
Yeah, so the second work package in our internal project terms was tackling the barriers for scaling up innovations. So we were assuming that the innovation has already reached the first technological readiness levels, and now it needs to scale up either in the country or internationally. And what we see when we talk with the startups quite often is that they say, okay, we have lack of funding, but you need actually to dig deeper and to understand what they need the funding for. Mm-hmm. And is it really that in the broad spectrum of financial measures and calls available that we don't have anything that fits to them? No, it's usually, it comes back to the capabilities inside the firm. Do they have a capability to draft a proper budget? Do they have capability to explain what the value they are providing and so forth? And another finding perhaps, or the outcome of structuring the challenges is about what are really the internal and external barriers. There are certain things that when we have problem, we need to look at the innovators or entrepreneurs themselves. Okay, why don't you do this? But then there are some external challenges where a single company, single entrepreneur, or sometimes even single country cannot change the system. So, and this kind of broader, like in economic terms, I would say market failures or systemic failures are where these European common initiatives and regulations really are basically the only way to start things going.
The European health data space is going to be active very soon, so we will see what the results and impacts will be. Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts and knowledge for this panel. We will now take a short break and be back in half an hour for our last part of the conference, where we will talk about the future and expectations around healthy and active aging. So thank you, and we'll see you in half an hour. And we're back. So, first of all, congratulations to everyone. It's been quite a program already. We have 1 hour left to go, and we will try to make it as interesting and energizing as possible, because, we all ingested a lot of content already. So the last thing on today's agenda is the outlook to the future. I would kindly invite the speakers for this panel discussion to join the stage, so just come up. We have Donna Henderson, who is the head of the Scottish Government's Digital Health and Care Directorate for International Engagement team. We've got Nele Labi, the Vice-chancellor for Innovation from the Estonian Ministry of Social Affairs. We've got Michele, Calabrò, director of EURIGA, the European Reference Network for Regional and Local Health Authorities. And we've got Michele Tendrema, the co-founder of the medtech company called TempID, that provides reliable and reusable continuous body temperature monitoring solution for both home and professional care. And we also heard a little bit about that already today. Before we dive into the discussion, here's a question for the audience again. So bring us all the ideas and thoughts about what do you think we need to boost active and healthy aging. Is it literacy? Do we need more innovation? Do we need more policies? Anything that comes to mind, and we will come to this question after the short presentation by Michele Calabrò about the policy recommendations that came out of the Info-RH project.
Thanks a lot, Tjaša, and it's a pleasure to be here for the final event of Info-RH. And indeed, as you said, we heard a lot about already what was done during the different work packages of Info-RH, but what we try to do with the policy recommendation is to learn from what happened basically in the different aspects of work, learn what the different partners encountered in terms of challenges, in terms of issue, looking at everything from the investment side, from the skills point of view, from the regulation, from how to harness data basically for active and healthy aging innovation. So with the policy recommendation, which can of course be found on the website of the project, we try really to summarize a little bit all the aspects that we want the project to push out to policymakers and beyond, actually to everybody, to really boost innovation in the field. And I mean, you can see them here. Hope you can see them. Yeah, they're big enough. We highlighted basically 7 key steps. So the first one is actually, we talk a lot about the need for investment. So the first one, it's really focused on that point. So boosting smarter and more accessible funding, covering all innovation stages. And that's actually a very important dimension that emerged in the work of Info-RH. So there are several already sources of funding. There are several entities for the public and other levels that are supporting innovation, but this should really be done at all levels, really starting from the very beginning, supporting validation, certification stage, and really making sure that we create an enticing environment to have innovation in the field. The second aspect, we talked a lot about it before, it's of course the side of harmonizing regulatory and reimbursement frameworks to support innovation. Of course, there's a lot out there. There are a lot of best practices already happening. We heard about the DIGA framework, for instance, so I think there's the need to also learn from such experiences, build on them, and not create everything from scratch every time, and really harness what's already happening to make it work in a more European way. Of course, again, there are limitations in doing that, but I think that's a goal. The third element is, of course, not only about making regulation as harmonized as possible with all the caveats of the case, but streamline information. So there are already examples that can be used, and I think it's important for innovators and for everybody to have easy access to how they need to basically comply with regulation and how they can access such funding streams or anything else that is related to facilitating their work. The fourth element, I think, really much links to what we're saying in the last panel, so unlocking the power of data for innovation in this field. I think there's nothing much to add. We all know about the importance potentially of the EHDS that could have in this field and in everything related to innovation and to improving health for all Europeans and beyond. So, again, putting in place all the necessary initiatives, the funding again, the instruments and the exchange of best practices to make sure that we learn from each other. The fifth recommendation, it links to the importance of co-creation and boosting, a person-centered principle at all levels and also at impact evaluation. So it's really about not only saying that it's necessary to have co-creation, it's necessary to look at the model of living labs, it's necessary to work with patients and any other and professionals to really create solutions that are crucial, but really to also provide the right tools to do it. I think that's also, these two dimensions always needs to be taken into consideration. The sixth recommendation, it's, I would say, very straightforward. So again, innovation needs to be used, and to be used, of course, it needs skills, it needs literacy for the users, for the professionals, but I would say also for those who are helping developing the innovation to make sure that they do understand the regulatory side, that they can really engage with also the co-creation dimension. And last but not least, of course, there's better connect the community. I think we're doing it today. There are a lot of initiatives that even preceded Infraha. We need to build on that and try to make the way forward as connected as possible. It's a big ecosystem. We kind of need to make it even more connected. And I'll have maybe some examples later.
Thank you, Michele. We're now going to check the results from the word cloud. Access to data seems to stand out in terms of what do we need to boost active and healthy aging and living. I would love to hear Donna and Nele comment this a little bit. So, you know, in Estonia prides itself in giving access to information and data to its citizens. So how do you see this call to action in essence?
I would myself answer the same thing, actually. I think in Estonia what we have done well is giving patients, citizens access to their data. In what we are not doing so well is giving this data to get more innovation and provide somehow this to research and innovation and companies. And for that, something that we are currently doing is creating a national consent service, so that the person can go to the national portal. We have all the government services in one portal, log in and select what kind of my data I am willing to send to what kind of companies. So today the government owns the data, and then we will make the connection. It's still in the process of the law, and it's not very easy, but this is the way.
Mm-hmm. One follow-up question. This is just in the preparatory stage, because oftentimes when we talk about sharing data from the decision maker's point of view, it's much easier to go into an opt-out system than to go into an opt-in system. So to which extent do you already know that it's actually going to be encouraged for citizens to share their data or to check this? Or is this going to be, you know, somewhere that you will need to work hard to find this questionnaire to tick the boxes of data sharing?
Generally, Estonian approach has been opt-out, but in that case, we are really reinventing the relationship between person, government, and private sector. At least we definitely will start with opting in, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, Donna, same question for you. How do you look at this from the perspective of your government? And, you know, you can also give us a little bit of insights about the current situation around data sharing.
I have to say that looking at the question there, and I'm sorry I can't look at it here because I haven't got my glasses on, I'm a bit blind, but why, you know, what do we need to boost active and healthy aging and living? And I'm a little surprised that access to data, which is really important, I mean, we've heard that in the previous session and indeed all day, so without doubt it's a really hot topic right now for us all. But I'm a little surprised that it's come out so strongly around us needing to, you know, boost active and healthy aging living, because for me, I think this agenda is around motivating all stakeholders to really start thinking about this, but from a life course perspective. You know, we've heard about active and healthy aging, but I think we've seen this agenda, certainly over the last sort of 10 years, evolving across Europe, and we're now talking about active and healthy living. You know, so it's not just about older people, it's about all of us living well, our whole life course. So for me, access to data is critical, but I'm surprised, thank you. I was surprised it was coming out so strongly, so maybe it's just the coming through. But for me, there are some other words in there that are really, really important. So I think, like engagement not only of older people, but actually all citizens in this agenda. You know, we've all been there where we've implemented projects that we thought would make a difference, and they haven't done that because, you know, there hasn't been that level of engagement and we haven't designed things in the right way. So I think we've learned that co-design from the very, very outset of taking, you know, new ideas to fruition into new projects and services or products and services is absolutely critical. And I would have expected to have seen co-design and engagement really coming through much more strongly. So that robust citizen engagement I would have expected to see come out quite strongly in there. And that's certainly something, just to finish up from Scotland, we have an approach called the Scottish design to and now I can't even remember what it is, Scottish approach to service design, sorry, that we now try and embed throughout all new service and product developments, and that's just trying to take that co-design methodology in throughout everything that we do, and I think that's critical.
Mm-hmm. Nele, we talked throughout the event about various aspects that need to be put in place around healthy aging. At the beginning, I mentioned that in Estonia, the statistics are below the European average in terms of the life expectancy, in terms of the healthy years of living. And if there's one thing that's been clear throughout the event is that there's no single easy solution to address this issue. It's not that you can put an innovation in front of people. You can't just change policy. It takes much more. So how do you look at this issue, you know, from the government perspective? Because it's about the cultural change. You need to change the life habits of people. How are you looking at the future, and what needs to be put in place to improve the healthy years of life?
Wow, a difficult one.
Donna, do you want to help out?
It is a complex issue and there is no one solution. And in Estonian case, you really have to look back for the history, where we come, how we used to live, how fast things have changed for us. And yes, living skills haven't met the speed. I think that of course, we have to deal with many aspects, but there is one clear thing that the state has to be always moving and finding new solutions. There's, in my opinion, an ugly word, nudging, but always trying to make the bad choices very uncomfortable and the good choices somehow easier and nicer. So this is not a destination, this is a path. I'm sorry, I don't have one answer.
It's, as I said, there's no easy answer, but we can address a few single points. So perhaps, Michele, what do you, from the industry perspective, from the perspective of the innovators, wish to see in the future done differently?
Me as a person, I would hope, or I would like to see that this innovation is not needed at all. But unfortunately, the life is that, or how it's evolving also, that people are probably maybe more stressed. The life expectancy and life quality expectancy is changing. And also like a lot of mental health topics are on the table. And then it seems that help is needed, and innovation and technology is something that could help in these matters. So, something that we have experienced with this TEMP-IDD topic, but also using our experiences and competences, we have helped to design other solutions and products and services as well. And main kind of feedback we get from our customers and from the market is usually that people start to, like whoever takes care of your family or elderly people in general, or just even your kids, the main thing when you start to think about getting some maybe technology to help you is after something has happened. And this is a little bit linked with what Nele mentioned, that about how we have solved the data topic in Estonia. Previously it was that we launched this digital identity. It was mandatory, you can kind of opt out, but for this kind of health and personal data related, you need to opt in. But if there would be this kind of like support or using the technology or using some innovative methods is kind of initiated or helped to get on the market from the maybe governmental perspective. Of course, every one of us in the society should contribute, and this would help the situation that we get help before something happens. This is maybe the most difficult step, but I would think that governmental and regulatory side can be very helpful as a kind of leading the way. What could help, and probably yes, not every project, not every solution will be like a great success. But out of 10, like a startup mindset, even if out of 10, one would help very much, then I think it's already, that's the trick.
You have to start somewhere. There are several policy recommendations that have been outlined at the end of the project. So, Michele, if you had to pinpoint to one, where can we start? How would you prioritize these recommendations?
Well, I would have asked like prioritizing 2 or 3, but as you asked me for one, I think as maybe something that we haven't really discussed into detail today is the investment in skills and literacy. I would say, because again, of course, we clearly know that we live in a situation where health systems have anyway limited resources. So, you know, as was said, you really need to bet on the right horses in a way, and to bet on the right horses, you also need to make sure that then what gets to the market is then used by professionals, it's then used in hospitals, it's then used by individuals, patients, and elderly people and so on. So I think, and to do this, one key element is of course to have more education, having people to know that, you know, they have tools and they have opportunities to take care of their own health. They have different opportunities to deal with public services, to use, share the data, control their data, know where it's like access. So I think giving them the education, the skills, the literacy, and investing in creating this opportunity, probably that's one of the things that I would start with.
Going from theory to practice, Donna, since 2019, there have been several programs in Scotland with the aim of creating preventative and digitally enabled services that support self-management approaches with and for citizens. Can you briefly describe these programs? So what are the use cases that you can share with us in terms of the successful approaches and what you learned from these projects?
Well, actually, we've been doing this for quite a lot longer than 2019. I think the COVID pandemic probably escalated the speed of deployment of some of our programs. But I think nationally in Scotland, we've been rolling out technology-enabled care programs since 2006, actually. But I'll tell you about a couple of them, and I'm going to put them into the context, really, of this past and present in this, in the European landscape. So for us, we've been rolling out telecare, welfare technology services, and supporting them at a national level since way back, 20-odd years. And we've moved during that time from an environment where we were providing very much reactive service. So people were appendant and they would press a button if they fell. So it was very much a reactive service, low tech. We've now moved into the present time where we're moving into a digital environment, and with that digital shift, it's now enabling us to really provide very proactive services where we're starting to actually predict what might happen to that individual and actually get much more delivering much more personalised services. So I think we've seen that real evolution, not only of technology, but also of when you embed a service and you grow it with your service users, that you can really grow a service that's fit for purpose. Another one that I want to touch on is video consultation. So way back 20 years ago, we were trying to implement video technology consultation It was very expensive. Clinicians didn't want to use it because they had to be in one space. Patients couldn't access it from their homes, so it had lots and lots of issues with it. Now you can use it on any device, and the clinician can be anywhere, and they don't need anything special or expensive to use. So it's low cost, easy to use, and COVID pandemic really it came into its own, and we saw huge escalation in numbers of virtual consultations. So again, we've seen that evolution of technology, the learning, the digital literacy has really taken off, and we can see that embedding. So I think the other two that I'll quickly touch on are our remote health pathways work. And that's really, again, about that at-a-distance monitoring of somebody's health and well-being so that they can actually access services at the right time in the right place. And the learning that's really informed our national programmes came out of a European-funded project called United for Health. And the learning from that was invaluable, and it shaped our national programme. And similarly, we have a digital mental health programme that, again, was informed by a European-funded project called Mastermind. So if you put this into the context of Europe, the learning that we've derived, and this is a key lesson learned, from looking outwards, what's happening elsewhere in Europe and beyond, and taking that learning back into our country, into Scotland, you can see the evidence of that learning from elsewhere. And I think that's one of the key lessons we would say. Look outwards, learn from others, and adapt that to your own environment. And I think another couple of key lessons must be around that co-design. You have to design these solutions and services with the end users, because otherwise they just won't work beyond a project. And I think our final one is really about that strategic commitment at government level, and this relates to your policy message there about the funding. You need to have a very strong government-led commitment and strategy that actually follows up and gives the framework for embedding these technologies in the long term, and not just doing a 3-year project that ends and disappears.
I love the fact that you mentioned co-design and working with the end users, because when we're designing policies and solutions and environment for healthy aging or healthy living, we refer to the present users, but we know that policies and changes are happening very slowly. So here's maybe a tricky question that you can think about. If we know that we are designing solutions today for future generations, how can we make sure that we're designing the right things, knowing that different generations have very different expectations and values in terms of what they perceive as quality of life, in terms of what means a lot to them? We know that Generation Z is much different than millennials or baby boomers or any other generation. So how do you see that we can ensure that what we are designing for the future is the right thing? Who wants to start?
I don't want to dominate, but I've got to say, living lab approach, I mean, without doubt, 100%. You know, I've been talking all day to my colleagues from Galicia about their fantastic setup there, but increasingly we're seeing the value of that environment where you can pull in citizens right across from all ages to design products and services that are fit for the future. And that's regardless of age. And also having other kind of innovative approaches. We've got a thing in Scotland called Digi Inventors, which is pulling younger people and asking them, we give them a big problem and ask them to design solutions for that problem. And it's really heartwarming to see the engagement that they have with usually, quite often older people, in actually trying to design and think out with the box. What could we do here when you've got this blue sky approach? So yeah, 100%. We have to embed that living lab approach.
That's a great comment, I guess. You can never know how others think unless you ask them. Do we have any other comments? Nele, do you have anything that you feel like you want to add here?
Yes, I'm putting this question into Estonian context, and as we have in some cases already 25 years of experience in digitalization, and the main thing that we have learned by now is back then we made these huge digital solutions, and it is really difficult to change anything. You try to change the smallest thing and the things just fall apart. So we are moving away from these giant systems and creating microservices. So probably we won't know what the future people will want, but let's make it easy to change the services back then.
Mm. If I go back a step to the Info-RH project, Michele, what would you say were the main lessons learned for you as a participant and Temp ID?
Yeah, we like work that we did were mainly linked with engagement of living labs in Spain and in Finland. And our company was briefly mentioned on the stage before as well, that we started with the kids, and originally we were like really like, it was kind of hackathon idea, very small scale, just to solve one problem, but then we started to explore and conquer the world quite rapidly. And yes, maybe we didn't think everything through very well in the beginning. But it was very good reflection point, because we have done different tests during this project, but also like even foreign aid to Africa. And even if you test the same like age or sex people in the Estonia versus Spain, the results can be totally different, starting from the language and cultural experiences into the environment that you have, where the things need to operate. So, and if more and more these solutions need to be really scalable on the market, we cannot only build this very innovative and expensive development projects for Estonia. We wanted to help more and more. Then having this kind of network of living labs or the kind of society in a larger perspective to cover different impacts and points that that you would not only see in your organization. And for that, these living labs, they provided good information like what we need to consider in product design more. Also gave us reflections like what works well and what not, maybe not so much. And also we got again this confirmation that there are some cultural market differences that we need to somehow compensate for. And we did even quite crazy things, that we did some trials in Finland for firefighters actually. This kind of came out through this project. So we could even help like quite a lot of industries with the same technology, and again what to consider there. So a lot of learnings, a lot of input, a lot of values. But yeah, it's you cannot only test one thing in Estonia and think that it's applicable in Spain as well. So there is differences that you cannot even imagine very easily here.
We mentioned that several times, that there's no way that we can expect that systems are just going to magically harmonize. You just have to adapt to each market specifically. But Michele, you're involved in the Ural Coalition, which is bringing together key EU-wide networks for active that are active in the field of active and healthy aging. Why is this important for Euriga, and what do you see as the next steps based on the Info-RH project?
Well, indeed, we are involved with that, actually, with other people that are also here in the room, with Donna and Karolina, also from ECH Alliance, and many others that are probably also following us online. I think, as you said, it's a coalition of the willing, in a way, of different organizations that are active in the field, that during the Info-RH project, basically, and very much building on the last recommendation, so on making the most of what's already happening out there, just decided, to start discussing about the different projects we are all involved in. For Euriga, for instance, it's clearly Info-RH. For other projects are previous coordination and support action in the field, or new projects on uptake on innovation, for instance. So I think why it is important, I think it goes back to also what Donna was mentioning. You mentioned like several projects already that like deliver some really important learnings that could be exchanged, that could be used by in other settings without avoiding, of course, the kind of simple copy paste. So I think a collision of this type is just essential because it really brings together different actors that work with different angles, with different networks. For us, is the region, could be more industry for other organization. Looking at the same issue from different point of views and trying to give different solutions also through initiatives that, for instance, are funded by the EU. So really that's the first step and why it's so important. And the next steps, we still need to define a little bit exactly the work plan, but I think anyway, working together in this way, it would be also essential to facilitate that kind of cross-border between health system exchange. It's also going to be at the center of other European initiatives, such as the New Horizon Europe partnership on transforming health and care systems. Again, really to make sure that we don't create everything from scratch every time that we look into an issue, but we really build on what we know, we really build on what's working in other settings, and we try to adapt it based on the different networks and the different stakeholders that all these organizations work with.
Thank you. Do you have any questions from the audience or any thoughts, any ideas about the future that anyone might want to add? No hands? Should we do? Oh, look. Ah, that helped. That's good to know. So, Nick, from the second row, has something to add. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for the very good discussion. And also here, like the other discussion, it's often at different levels, very practical, more policy, etc. So now we can look back on, let's say, 12, 13 years of programs related to aging, silver economy, etc. We are in challenging times. We have economic contractions, we have geopolitical challenges, we have all kinds of other economic factors which also might affect sort of healthy aging. So considering these major challenges, so what are the panelists thinking about how do we really can make the change happen? Because I think we've done good work, but it has been really hard. And we're still not very much there. So what should be done? What would make the sort of key difference into really changing Europe in the good direction?
If I had the answer, probably.
That's a million euro question.
It's a million euro salary answer, probably as well. Well, I would just, and this is, of course, my opinion. I think one key thing, especially because we are in this challenging time with constricted resources and everything, I think it's very briefly just linked to what I was mentioning already. So just trying to really build on these 30, 40 years of experiences in the field and try to maybe really look at in a more critical way of what worked and what didn't work. And really try to not just say, okay, we're going to learn from this best practice or something, but really trying to also kind of evaluate and really measure what works and doesn't work. And I think one point that emerged in the work lab was like, I think outcomes measurement or something like that. I think measuring more what happens, I think that could be fundamental in really trying to change things. Because until we don't measure things really in a good way, we really don't know what's going to work or not, or what worked in the past. And so we cannot really learn from that. But, it's, again.
I actually think that having this kind of strong focus on the particular hot priorities is quite an interesting one. And for me, the European health data space is a classic example of that point. We've all struggled with this access to data, so we weren't really surprised it was coming up there. But we've all talked about it for years and years. If only we could, citizens can access their own data, if only we could use data for secondary use, for purposes of research, blah, blah, blah. They've been issues we've been grappling with for years. Now that we're talking about European health data space, and thinking about how in the heck are we going to make this work on the ground when that regulation comes in, everybody is talking about it. We're talking at a European level, we're talking about regional level, we're talking in our organisations. Everybody's trying to work out how we're going to do this. And I think having that amount of energy and thinking going into this is a very, very powerful thing. So if we applied that same kind of approach and pushed up, and this is where, I don't know even how we pronounce it, but Euro, yeah, whatever. Yeah. This is where I think this collection, this collective of European networks, the strength in this collective of networks is coming in. If we can decide as a network, and the network of networks, a couple of key priority areas. So I think you touched on mental health. I think mental health and well-being is a huge, huge, huge priority area for lots of reasons. But that's an example. If we decided as a collective to push that at every level, through all our network activities, really starting to look at how we're going to get this going, the power that we've got at thinking and talking about that at all levels, I think could make significant change. That's my $1 million euro.
Thank you, Donna. We had one more comment in the back.
Okay. A long, long time ago, in a country far, far away called California, I studied something called recreation, did a master's degree. Just want to comment. We had a professor way back then who said, some people can retire and no problem. He said, but many, many people, they don't know how to retire. They only think they do. He said, they really need to plan. They need to work at it. There should be some kind of education program for retirement or getting older. And he said that I've watched many people who were very healthy and happy to retire. 1 year later, they were either dead or they looked like they should be dead soon. And so what do you think about this idea of doing training, education, teaching people what they should do, not a year before they retire, but sometime before, what planning and that kind of thing. That's it. Okay.
Who wants to take this one? And I would add, should they even think about retiring if they don't need to? In the UK, for example, the number of people older than 65 that are still employed in some capacity is 1.5 million. So if the life expectancy is extending, if the healthy years of living are extending, obviously, policies around when to retire or to which extent you should retire does change. So 2 questions in one. What do we think?
Yeah, I'm not too old yet, but I recognize quite a lot of myself in this question that I think in general that people cannot relax anymore. And I've been working in this kind of Estonian technology startup field, very competitive, fast-running sector. And if I need to speak to people about regular topics, then I struggle because I only have work topics. I think it's like planning to take the time off, even for short periods, and even for kind of how to go away from your daily struggles or daily life, and even maybe come back after 1 year, or having a plan for that actually sounds really good. And this should be engaged more. And in Estonia, we have this kind of a parental leave system that is quite flexible, and it could be, I think, even could be applied in this the regular people. We don't need to be waiting for aging and retiring for good. I think the skill for taking time off and coming back and contributing further needs to be improved in a more general way.
We have 7 more minutes, and there was another hand raised over there, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Because I work mostly with regulations, I have my own view of this, and one is more a short-term question, and another would be a long-term one. So the first, in the short term, regarding the medical device regulation, not only the data protection, a lot of companies are having difficulties contacting notified bodies. Do you believe there would be an extension from the European Commission? Just your own view of this situation? And the second, more long-term question would be that with Brexit and the difficulties over there, we have this situation where actually geographically very close countries are developing now their own regulations. Do you see this coming a trend in the future, or we would actually move towards that maybe the Europe and maybe the US and the FDA would get some consensus and more trust in each other's regulations? Thank you.
Any volunteers?
Well, maybe I can try, because of course to answer to the first bit on the MDR extension. I think I cannot give you the answer, of course, but like from our position working in Brussels and seeing several organizations, from patient organization to, of course, medical devices associations, but even some of our regions express concern about how rapidly is the deadline approaching. So I think I cannot say it's going to be delayed or not, but I can say that there's a lot of movement around trying to make it work in the right way, because it has several elements. It has the elements of industry, it has the elements of making sure that care to patients is not, of course, interrupted or delayed or hampered in any way. So I think there are several voices that are trying to look at that. But that's my 2 cents on the first question in a way.
I can take it also a little bit from our side, because it's quite active topic for all getting the product certified and interacting with notified bodies and getting the information feedback. You get answers from the notified bodies. What you don't usually like is that what they say about you, about the lead times, that how quickly they can visit you or how quickly they can have an audit. But this is also a little bit dependent on the latest change and to the medical device regulations. But I think it's also something that was discussed during this project in general, is how to provide quite a lot of insights and helpful materials, what is actually needed to get on the market, and what is the process there and what you need to prepare. So if you actually know what the times are and you know what to plan for and what to look for, I think it's not too big of an issue. In our case, we have been speaking about this getting product certified for several years already, because we just didn't know exactly what we need to do. I think all these kind of helpful materials are extremely helpful. And even about something that also companies also need to validate very well from their side is that you don't need to overthink quite a lot of things. Even in case of data protection, there is a lot of discussions about data. Briefly I mentioned that we did some work for Africa. It was for Red Cross in Kenya and Ghana, and they were wanting to monitor COVID spread in refugee camps, because refugee camps doesn't fall into any government statistics, but the Red Cross, as a human beings, they wanted to understand how the COVID is spreading. And one of the key findings that we had for our company, or for our insight, was that, at least in my head, I was thinking that the white man goes to Africa and says, "This is we are giving you a free aid, and please take it. I'm kind-hearted. I want to help you." And we haven't got so many questions about data privacy in Europe for entire of our company lifetime as we did from one refugee camp in Africa, because they are way more concerned about how you collect the data, what will happen to it, how it can be monitored, especially about the financial data, because a lot of people who have ended up in the refugee camps ended up there because of this kind of financial frauds. And after that kind of insight, we started to realize that maybe we have stressed too much about what is actually asked in the regulations. In quite many perspectives, they are quite vague. They don't give you like very strict regulations, but you need to kind of still prove that you are compliant with them and you have taken care of the safety measures and everything is in place, but you don't need to overthink it. And this is something companies quite often do, especially if they hear that it's medical regulation and already this kind of like a machine starts to work in the head. Oh, what the hell, it's so complicated, and maybe like how to get past it, or maybe we need to stop right away. So this is one of the issues, to actually educate the companies as well. But it's not very easy. The regulations are quite actually flexible if you have a like good understanding of it. And you also need to be, say, smart enough to apply them in the right way.
Thank you. And with that, we are going to close this last panel session and move to the closing remarks. Thank you all the panelists for participation, and also the audience with very active comments in this session. And I would now like to invite Irina Calderon-Ribar, the policy officer in the unit for e-health, well-being and aging at DG Connect with the European Commission, who will join us online for the closing remarks on the conference.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, so first of all, really sorry that I couldn't join you in person in Tallinn. I think that it would have been a much more interesting and valuable experience to be there in person, but unfortunately this was not possible due to working constraints. So for this very final closing remarks, I would like to first very much thank the whole team of Info-RH who have worked in a period of a lot of constraints, also due to the first year, especially due to the constraints related to the pandemic, and so in various difficulties to actually meet in person and do things, and nevertheless you managed a lot in these 2 years. So that would be my first gratitude to you for all the work that you did in the last 2 years, all partners, for also the evaluation of the reference sites, but also for the scale-up model that you worked on very hardly, and for all the work and all the really tens of webinars that you organized with various stakeholders that were really, really good and really meaningful. And it's very, how do I say it, not so easy to say closing remarks when there are so many things yet to be done. So when we talk about scaling up innovative tools for specifically for the aging population, it has been a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge. Nevertheless, this is very, very high on the agenda, also on various services of the European Commission, but you will very soon also see that we have worked closely on our Council recommendations on long-term care and how to integrate technology in order to further support long-term care in Europe. And we did a lot of work jointly in the Commission, also on promoting reforms with the technical support instrument on integrated care that was launched several months ago, and the projects that were selected for this technical support will start very soon in January to work on implementing reforms on how to integrate technologies when they provide care and health to elderly people, but also to other people with disabilities. And this is very relevant because while there are really hundreds of different solutions that work well, until member states do not provide for adequate mechanisms to reimburse those innovative tools or medical devices, it would be very difficult to really integrate them into health and care delivery. So it's a whole big challenge to work on different directions when it comes to really integrate innovative tools for addressing demographic change and well-being of older people. Before I say goodbye, I wanted also to mention to you that yesterday finally the work program for 23-24 was published, the Horizon Europe work program, and there are several interesting actions that could be very related to you, especially those that are on the silver deal, but not only, focusing a lot on deployment, because that's a real challenge across member states on how to actually deploy, integrate, and adopt those technologies. And without further ado, to say from the Commission that we would continue to work from our side, both on actions that would support research and innovation, but also on those that would support structural reforms and really working also with authorities to make it possible in member states to support innovative approaches to health and care. Really a big thank to your work and to gathering so many stakeholders also online and also now in Tallinn. I really hope that we would be working again with you and with all the partners of the projects, and that jointly with different ecosystems and stakeholders in the member states, it would be possible to push for this change, which is a change needed in how health and care are delivered. So it's a systems transformation from this point of view. So yeah, without keeping you any longer, I hope that the conference was really great for you. Really sorry I couldn't be with you there physically. I've never been to Tallinn, so that would be, I hope that when I go there, I'll give you a call to see you. Lots of luck to all of you and to all those that worked with you and contributed to Info-Raha and to all the stakeholders. And yeah, enjoy the evening, I would say. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. This brings us to the end of today's event, and I would like to invite Piret to the stage again for some closing remarks. So go ahead.
Yeah, Michele, don't worry. This condition you described, not being too old, this will pass sooner than you expect. And actually, that's why this topic is really important. And not only talking about it, but also using the results we produced during this project. All the results are available online, free of charge. Please share it, use it, and let's find also other ways to collaborate and use the outcomes of this project also in the future. I would really love to thank all the partners who are here and who are also online. It was a great pleasure to work with you and to create something valuable and meaningful. Hopefully also companies will benefit from it in the future. And yeah, now it's kind of getting over, or it's getting real that the work is done almost, or on the other hand, the work is just starting to implement these outcomes. I already thanked the partners. I would also love to thank the technical team who supported us today here. I can't thank you enough because you always do an amazing job. It's not an easy task to mix this online and offline presentations. I would also love to thank my team in Tehnopol, Katrin. You are absolutely precious. And also I would love to thank Helen, Pauline and Gerti, also supporting the activities here, and Marit should be somewhere else, somewhere behind the doors. So without support of the team, you can't do that, and you really have to have a reliable team. And in that sense, we are lucky in Tehnopol, we do have the reliable team. So thank you all for participating. Let's keep the good pace and let's move on with the activities and yeah, we're all getting old. Even now Estonians will understand these jokes, even Geteriani. So, okay, thank you. Use the last minutes or moments for communicating with your colleagues, and Katrin will tell us all the final organizational stuff.
So one more thing, especially for those that are following us online, we have a survey for you, so if we can just please share the last slide with the QR code, we would really kindly ask you to share some feedback by going to the slide or to the link in the QR code. Again, thank you everyone for joining and have a lovely rest of the evening.